Okay, thank you. I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:32 p.m. Have the coordinator please call the roll.
Mr. Dixon.
Present.
Mr. Rollins.
Here.
Mr. Scrivano.
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch. Here. Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Connor.
Here.
With 6 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Rod and Connor, who are in the back working to produce the broadcast for Channel 20 tonight. Thank you guys. As always, you do a great job. Remind the board members to hold your questions until after the presentations are done. First order of business, are there any changes or corrections or additions to the meeting minutes from our May 7th meeting? Seeing none, if there's a consensus to approve those minutes, give me a nod. Okay, thank you. We'll approve those. So we are now on to our new business, and our first item is Dr. Wolf is going to present the charter school renewals.
Thank you, and good evening. For much of this, we can combine A and B, because in our presentation, as we rehearse the process that brought us to this point, we use the same process for both Galapagos and Legacy. So those are similar. As we reveal the documents that we'll use going forward for our processing, they again are similar for both Galapagos and Legacy. And then we'll diverge and review their performance data over the last and our recommendation for the future. And then we'll hear from each of those schools in those times. There is a late addition to board docs, and it's called the Annotated Table of Contents for Charter Renewals presentation. And we did that because there were many, many documents there. So as we look at the problem, we'll start outlining those documents along 3 channels. So currently, the contracts for both Galapagos and Legacy expire on June 30th of this year, and we want to extend that. We also want to develop an actionable balance between the autonomy that charter schools have under school code, state law, and the accountability that we want for quality seats for students. And to solve that problem, we have worked extensively, and you'll see that work in many documents on board docs. Those 3 streams provide past, present, and future looks of the work. So the first stream is what the Illinois State Board of Ed produces about performance. There's an at-a-glance report, which is a 1-page front and back report on how each school in the state of Illinois performs along the ESSA accountability matrix. And then the other one is what they call a static report card, and that is a wide range of metrics between the school, the district, and the state. Where there are insufficient numbers, which is 10 or more for ISB, you'll either have an asterisk or nothing, or if there is no data. For example, Galapagos does not serve 9th through 12th graders, so there may be no data in that category. The second stream of documents in board docs are our documents that provide a review of the performance. The RSV report is what we will walk through when we get to each school's performance over time. There's the annual enrollments, which we've presented for the last couple of years after the fall housing numbers come out. The charter school renewal report is a 3-year rolling view of data, and then steps to charter renewal walks us through what we've done over the last 18 months, and we'll go deeper into that. And then the third stream is our framework for the future, and there are 4 documents in there. The notice matrix, structured for success, the charter renewal application, which is what we will ask charter operators to respond to in the next renewal cycle, and then a 2-tier renewal matrix that outlines quality points as we head forward. So those are the documents in board docs. Hopefully that makes an awful lot of information a little bit easier to access. So how did we get here? Your steps to renewal recommendations and refined practices, an 18-month journey. We stair-step you through where we began in 2017, and we started really developing learning partnerships with Chicago Public Schools Charter Division, the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, and the Illinois State Board of Ed's Charter Division. We then started to increase our level of activity, including site visits led by Dr. Jarrett as kind of a reset on our charter partnerships. This school year, we worked with SchoolWorks, which is a national expert on charter authorizing and school performance metrics. We made renewal site visits, and now we are presenting a handful of documents to you. It's also important to note that this is the second renewal cycle for the district. So each of our charters have had the initial application, one renewal time. This is the second time they're before the board for renewal. You also can see the various ISB documents that outline their performance over time. When we looked at alternative choices with our charter schools, we could go up to 10 years under school code for a renewal contract. We didn't think that that was in our best interest, and we'll outline that when we review each school's performance in a few minutes. But we had various years of renewal that we could offer. We also could go the road of saying we're not going to renew, at which point each charter operator would have the opportunity to appeal that to the appropriate state agency. It'll be changing perhaps. And if they were successful there, then the state would become the authorizer and we would be the payer, which didn't seem to be in our best interest either. But those are choices. So our solution for both is a 3-year renewal with concrete supports that they can count on from us, concrete metrics that the board can hold all of us to reporting to you on an annual basis, and for having specific improvement plans to improve quality seats for students. Of course, all of this is based on successful completion of a contract between the charter operator and the district. If you pull up the Structured for Success, I'd like to walk you through our solution a little bit on that. So the first pillar where we want to go is making everything data-based. And so if you looked at the charter application for future, or the responses, it's all data-based. Here's your performance, what got you these results, what will you do to have higher results in the future. And we're commingling both the elements that are required by the state of Illinois under school code and federal law under ESSA, along with a yet-to-be-developed set of metrics so that schools can articulate how they are tracking their work and the metrics that are state mandated. And we're going to work on that starting this summer with Dr. Munson and the Continuous Improvement Department to parallel the district scorecard and a charter-operated collaborative card. We're going to start collaborative meetings so that we offer a better blend of support and timely notification of issues and coordination of services are potentially out there. We are working hard between Dr. Munson's department, Susan Fumo's work, and the required documents, school-wide plans, 1003A, aka Illinois Empower work plans, and their own strategic plans to meld that together so that it's more about improving performance for students, less about planning to plan. And so that is a goal of ours, and to have clear targets for everybody to hit. Future renewal guidance, there's a notice structure. There are 5 levels of notice so that you can count on us reporting that to you, reporting it to them. Frequently, people will notice that not everybody is 100% compliant. The goal is to get everybody into compliance. So we will track all of that. There will be an annual performance report, the charter renewal report, the renewal application template that is already out there for you, the two-tier quality renewal protocols so that all current charter operators, any future, know that these are the expectations we have for student and school performance. And then, of course, there would be the next step would be a renewal contract and restatement. So that's the future. Our total cost is within the school code parameters, and the school code changed from a range of 75 to 125% of the per capita tuition charge to 97 to 103% of the PCTC is that number. We still adjust by the average daily attendance, but to date, as Ms. Yar's department has calculated that every cycle, it is still the 97% is the threshold that the schools have received. According to the current estimate from our financial report, it would be the amount you see there, just under $10,200 per student as the PCTC. Well, you can count on us for assessing this situation. We have the charter renewal report that will go down separate channels, the Illinois report card, both the at a glance and the static report, the ESSA accountability report that the state computes all of those metrics. For the renewal of the contract, up to 400 students would be served at Galapagos, up to 600 students at Legacy, and that includes all services outside of categorical funds. Reporting back to you, we will, on November 1, release the annual charter renewal report. There will be the scorecard that, as I mentioned, is yet to be collaboratively developed, including local metrics for each of the schools. The notice structure and ISB documents will come to you. So that's where we're similar. The process that got us here, the future that's structured for the future. On your board docs are two sets, and if we could, we'll walk through the first one, the executive summary, Galapagos Rockford Charter School, the Charter School Renewal Report. And it is a total of 6 pages for each. The first page on it is a dashboard, and the next 5 pages on each of those So this first page is your indicator light. The subsequent 5 pages explain each of those dials on your dashboard. So the top line is about student proficiency. This is as measured by state testing. The large oval there is the current performance level. And then at the bottom of it, we're starting our 3-year average that you will get, or I'm sorry, our 3-year running report. So in 17, 18, and 19. So you see reading, math, and writing. Line 2 is student growth, again, as measured by IR, or this is PARC, now it's transitioning to IR. If it is grayed out, it means that either there was under 10 students, that population was not served, or the state did not calculate that. So student growth in 17 is the last, the state did not calculate that. The high school measures, you see, are grayed out because Galapagos does not serve those students. Climate and culture, the enrollment to contract. So in your charter enrollment document, we have color-coded their contractual max for the last 2 cycles and listed their actual. So here's the a running look at that. And then student voice is an ESSA requirement for participation on the 5 essentials. Governance and finance is cash flow. That's a major indicator. What you don't want is for a charter operator to have insufficient funds to continue serving students. That would be wildly disruptive to our schools. So as you see, Galapagos has done a great job on that. Governance and compliance, our unresolved issues are there. There continue to be Open Meetings Act notices and things like that that we monitor. And then the renewal of site visit is the third. So we took the ESSA requirement and what Dr. Munson has done with the district scorecard and mirrored that 75-25, 75% on academics, 25% on others. The difference between our school scorecard and the charters is found in the autonomy afforded to them and the responsibilities. Our schools are not worried about meeting the Open Meetings Act. You do that, and that's their governance. They have a different structure. Our schools are not worried about cash flow, tax levies, et cetera. The board office takes care of that. So those are called out. Our schools also don't get a renewal site visit, so that's there. Our scorecard will have locally designed measures, so there's some variances in there, but we maintain that 75-25. So the renewal recommendation based on the dashboard is that because of below state average academic performance, but with positive climate and culture issues, a 3-year renewal with specific criteria for any subsequent charter renewals. So that's the dashboard. If we go to page 2, we break down for you what line 1 means. So the percentage of students meeting in reading, and this is the proficiency target. So we looked at it a couple of ways. One way that we looked at it was by the Illinois State Board's plan to meet the federal law, and that was all red. We then took it and did state average, district average, and below the district average. So you can see the metrics are along that line. Red is below the average. Yellow is our average up to within 10% of the state. Meeting is within 10% of the state average, and exceeding is over 10% of the state average. You'll see also then in the comments box, we compared year over year for your reading pleasure. On page 2 is student growth. So, sorry, it's page 3, indicator 2. So here, the state in computing the linear regression growth modeling, they index everybody. 50% is the median. You would expect 50% or more of the students in this state to be median or above and under. So last year was the first year. You can see where Galapagos fell on the state median. They came very close to meeting the median in math. And then in writing, because the state does not compute a growth measure, we just went year over year, and their performance on writing decreased. Page 4, or indicator 3, is on high school measures. Again, Galapagos doesn't serve them, so we can go to page 5. The enrollment to contract percentage, they actually were green, and at 86%, so percentages tend to jump up or down pretty large with the smaller group. So they went down 10%, but we're down 38 students year over year. And then the student voice, they didn't meet the state target on that. Then the last page is the governance and finance issues, and you'll see that they've had a positive cash flow and met the requirements on audit, et cetera, on an annual basis. Governance and compliance, we haven't had a formal notice structure. We will have that going forward, which will be incorporated in here, and we will have that for you. Do that. We had a renewal site visit. The one at Galapagos was led by a team from Schoolworks, was a learning activity. We also had Susan Fumo and myself on that team, and there are 10 indicators. That report is attached to your board docs. And we took those 10, gave 1 through 4 points, and Galapagos's score was 2.2, which is did not meet. So that is the Galapagos renewal report and why we're recommending 3 years. If we go to legacies, I promise I will be quiet and answer questions soon. So this should be a quicker review, but as you look at the performance, so it's all the same indicators, so you can compare them against the state, but then it's their own rating from 17 and 18. So again, we have below state average in proficiency, below district average in reading. Student growth was closer in 2018 for them in reading, not in math or in writing. They do serve 9th through 12th grade students at Legacy, but they had an insufficient population to report those metrics. So you have that. The climate and culture, that enrollment contract is explained in there, the student voice. And the renewal site visit, this one was led by a 4-person team from the district, taking the lessons we learned with Schoolworks. Dr. Munson, Ms. Kirschbaum, Susan Fumo, and myself went on that. And their composite score was at 2.6, which rounded to 3. So again, we have positive climate and culture factors, but below average achievement levels. And so we're recommending 3 years with specific targets for the future. The next 5 pages, I don't know if you want me to articulate those out loud. It follows the same pattern as Galapagos. So one of the things we worked really hard in our process was so that we could give you a product that you could compare and look across very simply on the dashboards. So that is what got us here. We have our charter operators here. They can share with you some of their greatest successes, their challenge going forward. But before we get them up here, I'd like to answer any questions about the process we took or our recommendations.
Questions, comments? Mr. Connor.
So I do have some commentary, but let me say that on the face of it, I'm in favor of renewing both charters. So this is not, so my comments are not about renewal or non-renewal. I don't know what others will say, but one of the key focuses we've had is on academic achievement. And so what I'll say is we would expect no less of the charters than we would the standard public schools. And so in that regard, obviously seeing some of the numbers in red on growth and really climate and culture and those things, I think the one thing that I would want to make sure that happens, and you've kind of alluded to this, is that there be a specific plan with targets that essentially we can monitor. I wouldn't want this to, be, I know that's not your intention, but to be another 3 years before we hear back. I'd like us to have a specific time and specific action plans from the charters to address all the areas in red for sure. And I would assume for the most part, a lot of the parts in yellow, like the reading growth that you have up there and so forth. So that's just a general comment that would be my expectations of the charters. But again, as I said, I'm in favor of charters, but for the charter folks, we've really, I would say, has spent a lot of our time in the last year in particular really hitting on this topic. So whatever standards, again, we would have there, we would expect charters to follow the same.
Okay. Ms. McCullough.
When I look at all these numbers, I'd like to know why you came up with 3 years. I mean, we haven't made There's a lot of red. And the blue is in cash flow and governance, although you just told me that Galapagos was not able to do all the governance compliance pieces because of the Open Meetings Act and other piece or whatever, but they still got blue. Didn't understand that. This one is legacy. I can flip over to the other one. So how did you determine 3 years? Why not 2 years? I mean, I really agree with Mr. Connor in that it gets away from us. We wait these long periods of time. We've been through this. I've been through this before. And we're always going to have metrics. We're always going to hold them accountable. We're always going to do this. And here we are. We are doing it again. And I don't know that we're seeing any more progress. You know, the whole idea with the charter schools is they're able to be innovative and do all kinds of things so that they come back and show those to us and how these work to make achievement happen. I don't see that. I haven't seen that. So why 3 years? Why not 2 years? What came to the time frame?
Thank you. So
Go ahead, Dr. Wolf.
Okay.
the 3-year term was, most research shows that in order to start making substantive improvement, it takes 3 to 5 years. So we went on the minimum of that. As Dr. Jarrett has been sharing over the last 18 months, we want to reset what we do with charter schools. And so we've been working to build a system that would include finite targets. You have a report now. You have the 2-tier matrix, which would show where we expect quality to go in the future. And we will produce an annual update on this, along with the collaborative scorecard to be developed with Dr. Munson and the charter operators on more leading indicators to improve that, getting from red to yellow to green to blue. But 3 years was because, to be fair to folks, and to
How long have we had the charters?
10 years.
Yeah, okay. That's not fair. You also mentioned, or is listed in these metrics, site visits. Could you tell me, and you said that they were graded, right? Was that the 2 point on the one, and the one got green, the other one got yellow? What's involved in the grading for those site visits?
So we included the full reports and the renewal document. So we go into classroom visits. We do an extensive document review. We do focus groups with both, not with both, with a variety of groups: parents, students, faculty, administration, and their board. And the protocol asks specific questions to get at strategic planning, teacher involvement in curricular decisions, et cetera, how students and families perceive their welcome, their instruction, why they choose to enroll their children at the charter and to stay there. All of those things get identified. And so there are more than 10 indicators, but at the end of the visit, the team sits across all of the data and they find the 10 that are most identifiable. So if a score was, we observed it in 12 classrooms and not in 12, it probably wouldn't make it because we couldn't make a claim. It wasn't effective or observed or not observed. These are the 10 that rose up as the leading indicators from the protocol.
I don't understand. If you saw it in half and not the other, would that mean?
It wouldn't have been the strongest indicator. So a room where we saw, or out of 26 visits, if we saw it in 18, didn't see it in an 8, you're going to have a stronger finding on that than 50%.
It still doesn't make sense to me, because I don't know what you're talking about in terms of what you're looking for. So,
There is an attachment with the.
okay, and I didn't read that. I apologize.
Yeah, there's an 18-page report that goes into detail about that.
And it's color-coded to let you know whether or not if it was.
I will go
things
back and look at that before we have our vote on this. So when you said coordinated PD, are you saying that programs that we're doing will be available? I don't know what you mean by coordinated PD.
So some of the things are universal. So assessments, we've started making sure that we invite the charter operators when we offer training on what's going into Park IR. PSAT, those things, we make sure that they have equal access to the training that we're providing, because at the end of the day, they're extending these services to our students. They're housed in a different building, but they're our students. So we want to do that. Ms. Lawrence and I were talking just today about, okay, how do we get through all of the procedures in special education when we have a district of 29,000 students supporting the work of the central office? Each of our charter operators have about 400. So what are things that we want to make sure that they know or have access to? They can choose other providers as well, the Illinois Network of Charter Schools, a wide variety, but where we can coordinate services and we hold things in common, and there's no additional cost to the district, we want to offer those.
But there is an additional cost to the district if we have to expand PD for
Yes.
these charter schools, so.
And where there's an increase, we'll offer that. But like when we offer assessment training, it doesn't matter if we have 40 people in our audience or 43. So we want to make sure that we communicate those like resources,
And that hasn't been done in the past, is what you're saying?
not consistently.
So the money that increased, you said we're at 97% at the 10-2, and what did we start at 10 years ago? What percentage did they get?
The first contract was 100, and this first renewal was 90%, which then got changed by the school code that gave us evidence-based funding to the range 97 to 103.
Okay. And then maybe it's in a document I didn't read, but I'd like to know about the turnover at the two schools in terms of staffing. Is that in there? And so can we, I mean, I'm glad it's in there, but I think I should just be able to ask the question as well instead of going dig. So, okay, thank you. So over the past, can you give us some numbers?
Sure. Legacy's staff retention rate is how the state reports it, has increased from 38 to 44% over the last thank you, Galapagos. Legacy is at just under 2/3 of the staff retention rate.
It's gone from what to what, let's just say? Let's give me the same metric for both schools.
That I have to look at.
Well,
I'll
if you're going
pull
to
it
give me
up.
goes
It's in the
from
report.
38 to 44%.
That one I remembered because it's the only one that would flash on the dashboard of being over 50%.
So 2/3, they have what, 66% retention-ish? And I remember that as being much lower.
So
That's
one
on the
previous
static report? Is that where that
renewals.
is?
It is.
Okay.
And it is also on the at-a-glance report, but the at-a-glance report is going to give you a one-year view of that.
Okay.
And then what about the special ed? What percentage are we talking about at each of the schools? What percentage of their students are special ed this last year, for example?
So it is again, on both reports. I can't recall, we can pull that up. It's on the doc, they're pulling that up. In special education eligibilities, all of our charter schools are roughly equivalent to the district average. All of our charter schools are below the district average in English language identified students. And we'll get the hard numbers. The at-a-glance report should have that.
There's a separate one for each school, right? This is in your at-a-glance report, is what you're telling me? So 14% ELA at Galapagos, 16%. Where's the rest of this bed?
Mrs. Peterson?
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Peterson, can you pull up the two-tiered renewal document, please? If I could, I just would like to make a comment on that to address one of the earlier questions that Mrs. McCulloch asked, because I think it's a very important one. When you ask the question, why, what standards are we using to determine the length of the renewal period? So I want to show how we attempted to address this. And this was a very, this was difficult to set this because the original agreement didn't speak to this. And so what we want to do is be very transparent with our partners on what the standard is looking like. And if you notice on the screen there, we have a 4-point scale, And the first column, if you're scoring a 3.1 out of 4 or higher, you could go up to that 10-year max, and we would allow expansion. 2.8 to 3.0, up to 5 years with expansion. 2.4 to 2.8, up to 5 years but not expansion. 1.4 to 2.3, up to 3 years. And 0 to 1.3, potential immediate revocation. I want you to notice, without belaboring it, that what we are expecting moving forward is a higher standard. And this again comes to transparency. I think we are ultimately playing the role of wanting to make sure we have very clear partnership standards. So we would agree that Dr. Wolf, I just want to compliment. He has put a tremendous amount of effort in the last 18 months at my direction of taking on a lot of extra work to help build a lot of documents through these partnerships because we, frankly, while we had a contractual agreement, had not done a lot of work on the relationship or having a really high-quality renewal process. And you can see with all the documents that have been created how much effort has gone into that. With that being said, we feel like it's important with that 3-year renewal. I also want you to notice that the standard, we are going to be suggesting higher composite scores for renewal in 3 years, with a 3.4 being the maximum number, and you can see that those are adjusted. So we're calling this a 2-tiered system. So this allows our partners to know that the standards will be going up for our expectations, but we want to give them time to meet those standards and to be as clear as possible in that partnership. So I think it's on a 4.0 scale. If you look at the scorecard, that's what we mean by a composite score. So you translate the composite score into a 0 to 4 rating, and you can see where this all goes. I know this is a lot of information to process, and I think, candidly, that's the way our partners may feel in this as well. So we're working hard to build a system that is very clear, very transparent, and ultimately increases in accountability, but also increases in transparency. We want to give our charter partners the opportunity to innovate and to get improved results, but we want them to see very clearly what we're expecting in the next 3 years to warrant either a longer renewal or an expansion opportunity, or to maintain their status as our partner.
And on the specific enrollment, Legacy had 46 students with IEPs, or 14.3% of their student population, against the district average of 15. And they had 26 English learners, or 8.1%, versus a district average of 15.9. Galapagos had 14.8 IEP and 6.3 English learners. So
Could somebody, I don't see another light on, so I'm going to ask another question, if that's okay, Mr. Scrivano. Can you speak to the movement of students? You had indicated, especially when you were looking at the numbers, I think it was at Legacy and the loss, and so they were at, I know it's a small number, so the more you lose, you don't make your percentage, but where did the students go?
So the student mobility is different than contracts. So their total enrollment fluctuates enrollment because they don't have zone attendance. All students choose to go to this school, and then students exit. So the student mobility rate at Galapagos was 15%, which is below the district average. Well, I take that back. The district average last year was 14%, so it's right there. The Legacy rate, I want to say 6.5, so 7%. So their student population is relatively stable for them. Students do transfer between the charter-operated school, Board of Ed governed schools, and outside of district.
So we don't know what percentage of those came back into the traditional system, or our system.
We have not tracked
outside of
that.
the charter.
So I guess I'm the big picture kind of looking guy. So my two notes are basically, what what we want to do with this renewal is the district and the board want to do a better job of communicating with our partners and collaborating with trying to improve achievement. And to monitor that, we're going to use scorecards. And we have a baseline now to know where everybody's at. And then there will be targeted goals to be achieved within a certain time frame.
Yes, sir.
In the 3-year renewal period, okay? Yes, sir. Curriculum, this may be, Heidi, is, one of the things that we hear a lot is aligned curriculum. How does that apply to a charter school? It doesn't? Okay.
It's part of their autonomy.
Yeah, one of the trade-offs is maximum autonomy in exchange for accountability. And again, when you see how the structure is in place, we are asking for significantly improved results, but our charters will maintain that autonomy to get those improved results over the length of the renewal period.
Thank you. Mr. Rollins.
On the static report cards, which you didn't talk about, I just had a question on the academic performance section on the sample sizes. So they're very small. So which one am I on right now? I think this might be Legacy. Yep, this one's Legacy.
Okay.
So it shows all students 21. So 21 students took the ELA proficiency test, like 7, and all students 11 for the math proficiency. Why are those numbers so small? Is that just being done at one grade level?
I'm migrating to you.
Well, on the Legacy static report card, it's page 7 of 17. And then Galapagos's numbers are similarly small, though.
Were those just students with IEPs?
Is this a state-generated report?
It is, yes.
So what are they reporting?
Well, some of these smaller numbers, I think, are for limited groups of students.
So on page 7, you're in the high school metrics, and so they have a small enrollment. High school is only testing previously for the state at 11th grade. The PSAT has been added to 9 and 10 and will be coming online.
But if you go to Galapagos, they're pretty small numbers, too, and they don't have a high school. So Galapagos, all students 28 for the ELA and all students 33 for the math. And by the way, why would those numbers even be different?
So you have students who are present for part of what shows up in these different reports. Students have to have been in residence, enrolled at a school prior to October 1, and still enrolled there May 1 to count in their numbers. But if a student had transferred, they might be charged back to the school because they had met a 134 calendar day enrollment number. So sometimes you're going to get a few numbers here and there that are different. A student didn't complete a math test due to illness or whatever reason, whereas they did in ELA. And it becomes more apparent the smaller the sample size.
Which gets to my first question, which is why is this sample size so small? I started looking at this because I was trying to dive down into the demographics and see how each subgroup was doing. I don't really like comparing to our district averages because every school has a different student population. But with a sample size this small, I don't know what conclusions I can draw. I mean, if you look at it, Galapagos seems to be significantly overperforming the district for Hispanic and Black students, which, I would expect any sort of a magnet program to substantially overperform district averages. I think what's dragging them down is their performance on their white students, and their white students may be significantly poorer than our white students. But then I don't see that same delta in the Legacy. I don't see that they're really overperforming, and in some cases they're underperforming the district average. But the sample size is so small, I don't know can I really draw any conclusions from that?
So because the state on the static report card is reporting grade level across each category of student, each group of student, you get very small. One of the nice things, in my opinion, about the at-a-glance report is going to compile all of that and give you the school average, which especially in a smaller population, I think might give you a different picture. But I certainly agree with you. Small sample sizes, you can have wild fluctuations year over year. I think page 2 on our renewal report, where we broke down like year over year performance, the state has been relatively static. They're up 1.5 points in ELA and math over the 4 years of Park. Legacy and Galapagos have both dropped in their proficiency levels over that time. And in all truth and fairness, so is the district average. So that trend is concerning to me when you look at their performance, taking all of the 3rd through 8th grade students who all took an English language arts test, all took a math test, with the noted exceptions. And the trend is going down, not up.
Can I clarify, Mr. Rollins? I think you were looking at the bottom of page 7 on the static report card where it says School 21 under ELA proficiency. Is that where you were looking to find that number? And School 11 for math proficiency?
Well, are you on Legacy now?
I am on Legacy, yes, on page 7 at the bottom.
We're all on Galapagos.
Okay.
Let me switch back to Legacy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Going.
Okay, yes,
That's where you were looking for the small sample size?
yeah.
That's just the number of, I believe, just the number of students who were proficient. If you look down much further in the report, it gives the actual number of students who were tested.
Okay.
So,
Well,
yes.
that makes a little more sense then. So,
Where's
which
the
means the
number
sample size is smaller and I could draw better conclusions, which gets me back to what I was first talking about, which is, at least at Galapagos, I'm seeing that they're significantly outperforming the district average for Black and Hispanic students. And then I'm not seeing that at Legacy. I mean, my starting point is that when you've got a special program that parents are choosing to send their kids to, I expect it to perform better than the district averages. But I don't think that you can, personally, I don't think you compare a school average to the district average because every school has a different student population. And I think that we need to be a little more sophisticated than that, and I think we need to be drilling down and looking at how different demographic subgroups are doing.
So Black achievement at Galapagos has dropped by 50% in the proficiency over the last 3 years, from 18 down to 9%. In ELA, 2016 to 2018. They're down 3 points in the Hispanic group, from 24 proficient down to 21 in 2018. And that goes along with an all drop from 21% to 14%. So,
You're on Galapagos now?
yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, so I had to switch back.
I mean, the state gives us so much information, and actually to come up with those aggregated, I went to the Illinois Interactive Report Card that the state now just calls IllinoisReportCard.com.
Great.
And you can there, and we've shared that before with Ed Committee, you can take any different subgroup across the last 3 years and compare them very quickly.
So Galapagos, for Blacks, their math proficiency was 8.9%, and the district average was 3%.
So one of the other comparisons when we look at writing proficiency, we, the district, and Galapagos outperform Legacy in writing proficiency. I'm sorry, in English language arts. But Legacy outperforms the district and Galapagos in writing proficiency. Why is that? Because Ms. Detman can give you all of the hard facts about it, but basically reading and writing are going to go together. So what can we learn, which is partly why Dr. Jarrett wanted to reset the conversation, what can we learn from each other? What is Legacy doing in writing that is beating the aggregate scores for everybody? What is Galapagos doing with students who are identified as Black in math that we can learn from?
I'm not saying anybody should be patting themselves on the back because everybody's underperforming the state average. Yeah. So, I mean, we all should be targeting the state average, but I also, my basic point, which is something I've said before, when we're looking not only at the charters, but at our own schools, we need to be looking at how each of the demographic subgroups is doing, and because each student population is different.
Yes. And that is captured in state accountability systems and on the scorecard.
Mr. Siegel?
This question or comment may be directed to some of the folks from the charters, but I guess I'll also lead off with I'm inclined to vote for the renewal. And I think a 3-year renewal reflects the kind of urgency that this board has been pressing upon the 205 administration, and shouldn't necessarily be seen as something particularly negative. But one of the things that's, I guess I need to ask is, for the sake of everybody to elevate their performance, is there a certain amount of autonomy that could be traded off for some faithful collaboration? There are clearly things that each entity is doing better than the others. I suppose one could argue that we're all performing at a level where collaboration borders on the blind leading the blind, but I don't think that that's really the case. I think that there are strengths that each of these entities can bring, but is autonomy such a sacred thing that it can't be seen as being made available to collaboration?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think any moving away from autonomy would be something that charter partners would have to voluntarily enter into. The very nature of the charter school agreement is founded on autonomy from the district. So voluntary collaboration is certainly possible and even encouraged, but it cannot be required.
But I haven't heard that resistance. They were very welcoming to Dr. Jarrett, Dr. Munson, and myself. And I think you're right. Nobody's patting themselves on the back, and I think going forward, we know we're stronger together.
Ms. McCullough?
We were trying to understand something. So on the participation numbers, on the static report card, if a school has, so which one is this? Did we say this was Galapagos? So if for Park Math participation was 201, which is 97%, what number of students do we have there? How is that
300?
They were around 300, so K1 and 2 are not tested under Park.
Okay, and so that's the different,
And
and they're not included in any of the other tests groups then? K1 and 2, or just one?
K1 and 2.
Okay, that was the question. Kudos to you for the metrics, for the data being fairly easy to visualize in the dashboards that you've put out there. I really, really appreciate that. I'm just going to reiterate, this is where we were 5 years ago when Mr. Wiesman stood up there, and we're going to hold him accountable, and we're going to have all these metrics, and we're going to do these things. And so I think we're at a better place, and I do appreciate that. And it sounds like we're at a better place with our collaboration and openness. So all those are good things. And I appreciate all the work you've done toward that, and I'll dig deeper as we have some time to think about it. Thank you.
Mr. Connor?
Yeah, one final thing, since Mr. Siegel brought this up about autonomy. Obviously, there's a history behind the charter school movement, and I mean, I think, and I'll comment on the cooperative part, but I mean, let's put this in context. This was put in place to really have it separate for a lot of reasons. And so, and I appreciate the idea of the cooperativeness, but I think academically, I fully understand, why charters are set up the way they are and why they function. Actually, what I was going to say is, and I'm glad Mrs. McCulloch brought this up, 5 years ago, I thought the atmosphere was much, from my point of view, was much worse. And I think kudos to the two charter schools in front of us. They really, I think the relationship is much better, and that's a two-way street, but I really give them a lot of credit for that. And I think the one thing that I've said since day one, and I will say, these are all our kids. And so I think, the one thing for the public that's watching is that we need to think of the charters as true partnerships, even though in some ways it's on a separate track. And I know one thing, for example, and I'll just, for transparency reasons, say Mr. Lane and I have talked about, is the relationship of things like extracurriculars to make it easier for the charters to participate in things like that. And what I'll say is, all kids in District 205 deserve opportunities that provide something tangible for that to be better. And so what I'm most pleased with is, A, we have got a structure in place, but I'm much more pleased with the relationship side for both. So I will say kudos to both the district and to our charters for really going a long way on that.
They were extremely open and welcoming with documents and the renewal site visit.
Sure.
So Ken, for lack of
Ms. McCulloch?
taking too much time, I'm just going to channel Jaime here. He's sitting next to me, and I'm thinking, Jaime's thinking, is 3 years a sense of urgency? They are our kids, and that's why we're concerned that they get what they need, as well as all the students that are in our district. And is 3 years a sense of urgency?
And I will just kind of make a final comment. We hear from teachers a lot, about, should testing be the only way we define achievement? And obviously there are many other ways things to include in, how is a student achieving and being successful? The reality is this is what we're judged on. And we as a board have been putting the feet to the fire of the district administration here for at least 2 or 3 years or whatever, to drive achievement towards that state average and beyond, and we're not there, and it's unacceptable. So we have to put some urgency on improving our student achievement. So, Dr. Jarrett?
Yes, if we're done with the questions, I did want to offer the opportunity for both of our charter providers to have the opportunity to make some remarks tonight. I would ask, because of the length of our initial presentation, that the remarks be brief, and I would like, because of that, would like to offer you some time at our next board meeting to continue those remarks, so in order to make sure that you have an opportunity also to reflect on what was presented tonight as well, and to tell your story and what you plan to do with the renewal period, and your desires and hopes, not only of what you have done in the past with our students, but what you plan to do moving forward during the course of the renewal period. So I would be happy to invite both partners up in the order that they are in the presentation, but if I would like to request that we keep the remarks relatively brief tonight, and then I will offer up some additional time at our meeting next Tuesday during the superintendent's comments, so you have a chance. I think it's hard to fully comment when you haven't had the opportunity to reflect on the board's comments and get a sense of the questions and comments that are out there. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I believe first on the agenda was Galapagos, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Lane from Galapagos.
Thank you very much. We are excited to be here, and I do want to respectfully request from the board that you do honor or deeply consider the recommendation from the administration. We've been serving the scholars of Rockford. They are all of our scholars. We've been serving them for 10 years now, and I would agree with you. All of us need to do more, right? There are challenges. We see quite a few every day. We see it in being able to hire quality instructors, especially at the more hard-to-hire areas of special education, math, and science. We see it in the test scores of our scholars when they walk in the door for the first day, when we get a significant number of scholars coming in at the 20th percentile. Those are challenges. But honestly, I know we've got plenty of educators in here. They're facing the same challenges. So I'm not gonna cry any tears that this is just what's affecting Galapagos. But those are some of the challenges that we have. Now, I am proud of Galapagos. I think there's a lot of ways to look at the data, definitely when we're looking at different subgroups and so forth. One thing that I've always been proud of Galapagos that we've been consistent on is that we do serve primarily a population of children of color and primarily children of very low socioeconomic standing. And despite that, we outscore a large number of the schools that actually serve children of higher socioeconomic standing, which does buck national trends. That does, I understand the numbers are still small, right? And we still have to grow those, but we have found success, at least some success in doing that. Now we know, I would not sit here and say that you should give us a 10-year charter. We don't deserve it at this point in time. I think a 3-year charter is fair. I think we've already seen some of the fruits of our labors. We've put in some plans over the last couple of years, put in plans like extended tutoring, both for our lower academy and upper academy scholars. We've put in plans of summer school. This will be the second year in a row in which we're offering summer school that has actually become not just mandatory for some scholars, but actually quite popular for parents, to the point where scholars who don't have to go, actually we've got quite a few on a wait list at the moment. Now, we've already seen progress. Now, you're not looking at all the metrics we look at. One of the metrics that we've always strongly looked at has been MAP, NWA MAP. And we do see strong growth on that. We see across the school this year, spring or fall to spring, we see about 70% of our scholars meeting their MAP growth goals on normative data. When you look at normative national data, 70% of our kids hit or exceed their goals. Now, the problem is a lot of them are already below average. So even when they hit their goals, yes, they made growth, but they still haven't hit those levels that we all need them to hit. But they're making the growth that we need them to make to eventually get there. Now, I'm also excited to say, and this is very preliminary data for sure, but as Dr. Wolf said, we've seen some stagnation in our ELA over the last couple of years. I've looked at our preliminary data on the IAR. It's preliminary, right? I don't want to say too much, but we saw good growth in that. We saw a return to where we were before. And I think that's reflective of the services that we're offering our scholars right now. I think it's reflective of the services that we offer our instructors in extended PD opportunities. I think we're also seeing, look, we're still a young organization. I know we need to be performing at higher levels. We're still babies when you compare ourselves to districts, right? We're 10 years old now, right? We do have to grow up, and in some ways we have. When I look at what I expect our retention rate to be this year, not in the data yet, I expect us to be amongst our instructional staff, I expect us to be above 80% this year, based on what we know from commitments from our staff members. So that is the type of growth we want, that we expect to see, and expect to see more of moving forward. Now, I applaud the district for putting these metrics in place. We can definitely sit around and argue which metric is better, and I don't think we'd ever come to a full agreement, a whole room full of people. We're going to find different metrics that we prefer, right? But I like the fact, and I've always advocated for the fact, that we move towards uniform metrics so we can look at and see how we're performing against others. That being said, and I think a few of you mentioned this in some of your comments, the metrics are what we're being held to, but it doesn't always represent who we want to be as a community as well. Yes, we want our scholars to score well on academic tests, but we want our scholars to also be well-rounded and experiential, have those extracurricular activities. And honestly, one of the things I'm so proud of Galapagos, and I would challenge, honestly, almost anyone to find another school in Illinois that offers the types of programs that Galapagos offers. We offer some programs that you will not find in Naperville, you will not find in Glencoe, you will not find in Winnetka, you will not find in Chicago. For example, this year we're sending 20 scholars to Northwestern University, their gifted and talented program this summer. That will push their academic growth. That puts them in the same league. They will be with scholars and only scholars who are at 90th and 95th percentiles and above. That takes some of our strongest scholars and really pushes them forward. It's an extremely competitive program, and I'm actually proud to say that we send more scholars than any other school in Illinois to that program. We send scholars to Northern Illinois to the STEM program in DeKalb. Not as prestigious, but another way that we try to attack the deficit, the summer learning deficit that we oftentimes see. We send scholars to Harvard University 2 years in a row now to study the Model United Nations. We are the only school in this part of the state that runs a Model United Nations team for middle school. We have kids talking about nuclear disarmament, talking about poverty, talking about world hunger, and learning in that process to negotiate with others. Some of the soft skills that anyone who's been a businessman or a leader of any type know that you need just as much of that as strong reading and math skills. We send scholars to opportunities that honestly you don't see anywhere else. This third year in a row that we will send scholars down to the rainforest of Costa Rica, and they will work with biologists to track different butterflies, to build habitats for frogs in real rainforest. We're excited that this year we will be sending our first group of scholars to Africa, to Uganda and Rwanda, in a program where they will meet with children from across the United States and Africa to engage in discussions on topics such as world hunger, such as world poverty. And the great thing is, it's Africa, right? I'm not going to send a 7th grader to Africa. So we reached out to our alumni who are RPS scholars. We've got a scholar coming, former Galapagos scholar, who's at Guilford. Another former Galapagos scholar who's at Auburn. So this is the type of collaboration that I think that we are really pushing forward to make sure that we can partner with RPS in the future. In terms of other partnerships we're looking at, Dr. Wolf and I have talked about additional partnerships with Galapagos, Legacy, and RPS in terms of bringing some Northwestern summer STEM programs to Rockford for the first time. So these are the things I'm excited about. And yes, we need to, there's no doubt, please, I'm not going to I don't want anyone to walk out of here thinking that I think our scores are where they should be. We need to continue pushing, and honestly, that's what my staff does. That's the only reason I'm still here, is because I know we've got unfinished work.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay. Legacy?
If I may just say one thing, just one quick thing, I apologize to Legacy. I appreciate the opportunity for to speak next Tuesday. Unfortunately, I will be traveling with one of those trips I just mentioned,
Okay.
so I just wanted to let the board know that I do have to respectfully decline that one. If there are
Okay.
questions, I'm more than willing to stay and answer them either publicly or individually.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Mrs. McCullough?
Dr.
I do have a
Forte.
question. All those programs that you are sending people to, Northwestern, Harvard, Uganda, they're all paid for by your school?
They are paid for, so yes, we pay for a vast majority of it. Now it depends, depending on the program. something that when the nexus of academics to the program gets larger, it's all donor-based pay, right? So as much as I think Africa is a great program, it was my mandate, a self-imposed mandate, that that's paid through by private donors, not through public funds. Similarly with Costa Rica, right? Some of the programs that have a closer nexus to direct academics, like Northwestern, we do still receive a good majority of the funding from Northwestern. We've had a partnership with them for 10 years. They've provided us $30,000 of scholarship funds this year. We do get a little bit from Title I to support that programming. But generally, we're very proud of the fact that we're able to reach out and create partnerships that allows us, for example, even the Africa program, we partnered with a program out of Colorado, the Global Livingston Institute, and they're paying for one of our scholars to go fully. So that's the types of partnerships that we feel proud of that we've brought to the community, and something that I think reflects positively on the community moving forward.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Dr. Forte up to the microphone, and thank you, Mr. Lane. I appreciate your presentation.
Good evening.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the board, and I appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate the board's effort to collaborate with the charters, which can only make all of us better. At Legacy, we do follow our data very closely. And so what we want, proficiency, there's no question but that proficiency is the ultimate goal as it relates to student progress. However, to get to proficiency, we've got to get the growth. And so what we wanted to point out is that while our proficiency percentages are still much lower than we'd like, our growth percentages are significant and substantial, even with our subgroups. So if you take a look at the chart that we've passed out for grades 3, we got 37% growth in English language arts, 45% growth in math. For grades 6 through 8, we got 50% growth in English language arts and 45% growth in math. For 3rd through 8th grade totally, we got 47% growth in English language arts and 46% growth in our math, which is an indicator that we are definitely on the right track in terms of moving the students and getting them closer to proficiency. It is unquestionable that a lot of the kids that we receive are not where we'd like them to be, and so it does take a minute to get them. But when we can show the growth, it does indicate that we're on the right track and we're making some progress with our students. We took a look at and this is part of why we were able to get the commendable designation from the Illinois State Board of Education, is because our special ed students showed 42% growth in English language arts and 46% growth in math. Our English language learners showed 39% growth in English language arts and 43% growth in our math. Next week, we will, on Tuesday, if we have the opportunity, we will bring more information regarding our subgroups in terms of African American students as well. So we're proud of the growth, and we do acknowledge that we have a long way to go, but we are on the right track to getting more and more of our students proficient. We're also very proud of the fact that we got authorized as an International Baccalaureate World School for the middle years program. And if you take a look, and we got it for grades 6 through 10, if you take a look at our scores in English language arts and math, we got significant growth in grades 6 through 8, and we think that is due to the IB program. In addition, Legacy will be offering pre-advanced placement classes for our in language arts, math, fine arts for all of our ninth grade students as well for the coming school year. So while we do have, and also we have applied for candidacy for International Baccalaureate for the primary years program because we feel that that has had a great impact on our student academic performance. So while we definitely do have a long way to go, we feel like we are on track. We want to continue the momentum that we've established, and that does come from having a fairly stable staff. We don't get, our turnover hasn't been as great, excuse me, in the past 3 years as it has been prior to that. So we worked really hard to stabilize the staff, and that we feel contributes as well. But we will definitely continue with the momentum that has gotten us to this point, and we are definitely excited about working with and collaborating with the district to ensure that we provide the students what they need for academic growth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to ask a question, Ms.
Oh, I
McCullough?
do. Can you just speak to the IB middle year program? What is it you had to do to get that designation? And what kind of requirements are involved for like your teachers for you to have that?
Well, there is extensive training involved. But we had to go through a process. We started as candidates, and so they give you a sponsor who comes to work with your school and prepare you for implementing the IB program. It took about a year and a half to get the authorization, but there is extensive training involved. Administrators have to be involved in the training as well as teachers. So there's a lot of face-to-face training, which means an extensive amount of travel, and then we can also get the online courses as well. But we try to make sure that we get as much training as we possibly can. We've also contracted with a consultant who comes in periodically to continue to support the teachers in developing their unit plans and their lesson plans to ensure that the kids are getting the full benefit of the IB program. And what we found is that we feel that contributes to the success that we've had with our writing program, but also in terms of our kids' ability to express themselves there. We do actually, with our kids, we do quarterly community outreaches, and we have a lot of culture clubs that reach out to different charities as well as to other countries. So the IB program has done a tremendous job in developing our students as global citizens.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Rollins.
This isn't really a comment for the charters, but I was just going to comment that we've got really 8 choice programs in this district, 3 charters and 5 magnet programs, and 2 of the charters are in front of us. And I think we're going to be having a presentation on the district's own magnet programs sometime in the future. And these are good conversations, and I hope we apply the same lens and rigor to our own programs as we apply to the charter schools.
Thank you. Okay. Again, thank you for being here. And Dr. Munson, you're up next. An ECRA presentation.
Good evening. So tonight is one of many trainings for the rollout of our scorecard. So I will be coming back over the next few months to lay out different portions and components of the scorecard, which will then sunset in November when we have our complete populated scorecard in our dashboard. The reason November is that is when all of our data will be accessible and will be populated inside of our scorecard. Some of the data at this time, as you know, is embargoed, so that will allow us to see our whole comprehensive scorecard at that time. But tonight I have with me 2 members of ECRA. Again, ECRA stands for Education Consulting Research Analytics. This is a third-party partner that we have been working with who are going to be building 2 platforms for us. One of them is the overall district scorecard, and the other one is a predictive statistical analytics, which is in a school improvement format. So I'm going to actually introduce the partners from ECRA, and today is going to be just that level of training. We're going to focus on one component of our scorecard. This component is in both of our scorecards from K through 8, as well as high school, and it talks about both growth and proficiency. So I'm going to invite Gina Semenak and Kate Story to join me up here, and we're going to co-present this component in this one level of training for our scorecard.
Will there be a test after?
There will be a test, so pay attention. There's a lot of vocabulary tonight, so please pay attention.
Okay, darn.
No, you may not.
I don't know, can you?
Can you? May you? May you?
I'll meet you out by the,
Okay.
Bring it.
by the boiler, pal.
You're supposed to be our star student.
Okay.
We often do administer tests, we just won't really grade them for you. How's that? We'll check your understanding. But we're happy to be here, and Kate is really going to be the lead consultant that provides the professional development and the training for the district and building level administrators throughout the year. But starting with this topic of strategic leadership, and when you think
Gina,
about that.
could I ask you to move a little
Oh,
closer
sure.
to the microphone?
Is
Or
that
maybe,
okay?
yeah.
Can you hear me better? Thank you.
That's better.
You know, strategic leadership, when you think about that, you know, and how do you build an evidence-based practice, it really starts with measuring what matters. We've heard a lot of discussion already tonight about measuring in different metrics, but measuring what matters, I think you have to focus on, you know, the outcomes that are really making the greatest difference for students. And you'll notice throughout our work, ECRA as a firm has always been very student-centered and very focused on that. Right down to our analytics. So tonight I'll provide you an overview of that. But to start with, this slide should be familiar because I think Kelly probably presented this. Yeah, in January. As an Illinois, you know, Empower Learning partner, what we're collaborating with the district on are two really areas that she touched on. One is this dashboard, the strategic dashboard that will pull multiple data points, you know, from some that ECRA will be providing through the analytics, some through your Decision Ed warehouse. But it really starts with the strategic priorities. So for the last several months, we've been working collaboratively with the administrative team to understand what those are, to understand sort of what is the vision for the schools and for the district. And what's important is to understand the gap between that vision and where reality really sits. Where are you currently, right? And then how do you move toward an improvement framework that not only helps you make some improvements and know what's working so you know what levers to pull, but then put it all together in a summative way to envision that, you know, through the dashboard. Our platform, we refer to this ECRA's platform, it's an intelligence platform. There are two different apps. The strategic dashboard app is what will be not available really for you to view until all the data is, you know, publicly released. So that's end of October, November. Really in November. But our approach aligns district goals, school improvement process, and the monitoring of individual student growth. The school improvement app is where a lot of the training will be throughout the year with the principals and the district leadership team. This scorecard here is just an overview. This actually is a draft. The numbers are not yours, but it's a draft of what that will look like. There will be a scorecard for every school. There will be an overall district level. It's an online tool, and what's important to realize is wherever you house them, whether it's in a PDF report, if it's in an online dashboard, the key to creating this is to help you govern. It's to help give you better insights, to help you strategically monitor what you said you were going to do. What would you commit to? What were your strategic goals and priorities, and how do you know you're making favorable progress toward those end goals? But the outward-facing component of our online dashboard also allows you to communicate very clearly what you value. You know, measurement is an interesting thing. Measurement will motivate. We know if you're not measuring something, you can't be monitoring it, you certainly can't impact it. So what you choose to measure speaks volumes about what you value, and the ability to share this at some point, you know, publicly will really allow you to really brand and communicate who you are and what you believe and value. So there'll be a scorecard for every school, an overall district level, and then the superintendent's scorecard is also under development. And they'll all be housed in an online fashion with ease. So when we talk about evidence-based frameworks, while ECRA does work, you know, we're a professional learning partner across the state, and nationally we work in a lot of a broad variety of areas, but we tend to focus on rigorous approaches to measuring student success, personalizing growth, connecting the student outcomes to improvement efforts so you have better visibility, you know what's working. That's, I think, the most difficult thing for schools to do, because you can't randomize to do any true experiments. You can't send some kids home and say, stay home because you're in the control group and I'm going to see if this reading intervention works for the rest of the kids. And you can't do that, right? Not easily. So you have to find more sophisticated way analytically to get you that same sort of, end result and information. So we start by providing local growth models, a set of local growth norms that allows, very sensitive measurement and anchoring it to personalized projections for every individual student. So this framework starts with every student. All the analytics, all the work is done at the individual student level. And once you get it right there and you understand a student's prior history and what trajectory they're on, then you can aggregate it very easily to a group of students, to a subgroup, to a particular program or intervention, to a grade or a building or across the district. So, the national landscape has certainly been highlighting the discussions and the debates between proficiency and growth and, what are they, how are they different, are they the same thing? Proficiency and status, everybody in this room understands them, I'm sure, because you're working in an educational or you're involved in the educational sector. But proficiency or status is a lot of what we heard about where are kids performing, where is Gina performing on a test, or what percentage of students in a grade level are meeting those standards, or the district overall. That's proficiency. It's a point in time, some reference in time where growth, you're actually looking at how students learn or grow across multiple assessments across time. The interesting thing here is this is probably a good example when policy actually is driving some of the best practices. Because through all this, policymakers have come to the realization that growth is more equitable when you're looking at assessing improvement efforts. In isolation, proficiency alone might still be the ultimate aim, but it is not an adequate metric to really know if your improvement initiatives are having an impact. So it's key that you're always looking at one in context of the other. We would recommend when you're looking at growth, don't just say, these kids grew or this percentage of kids, showed whatever they were supposed to grow. Where are they in reference to proficiency? And I did hear Dr. Wolf mention that. I heard Galapagos mention that their growth, might be showing that they're growing, but if they're not proficient, you have to look at both, and it's probably the biggest message here. So developing a more sophisticated analytic framework to measure growth. I will say for any model for measuring growth, they will all work off of this same concept. To measure growth, you have to have some projected or expected achievement. And then when you get the actual scores, growth is some definition that really captures the difference between the two. The way competing models for growth operate are really what are you using for the baseline? What information are you starting with to make the projections? And then how are you quantifying that growth score? What are you doing to the difference score and then expressing that in some number? So to describe how ECRA's model works is we've established local norms for multiple years of data, and we use your formal assessment system. So when we talk about assessment data, and that's primarily what the accountability framework holds you accountable for, to use your full assessment system or program in a way that helps you make decisions is really important. You're spending the money, you're spending the instructional time to administer the tests, you're looking at the results. It's really important that you use them systemically, rather than looking in isolation at a fall map test or a winter map test or the spring park or IER test or the PSET in the fall or SAT. Find a way to integrate this analytically so that you're able to look across tests, across all points in time that they've taken the test. And so that's what we do. We establish local norms, multiple years, that becomes your fixed standards. You now have an internal metric to know what you have to beat to show any evidence that you've made an improvement. If you're only chasing or only really reporting or tracking aggregate levels of an increase of some universal proficiency bar, so the state bar right now for IER and Park has historically been 750. That's the score in any grade that a student has to meet to say that they've met the proficiency standards. If you're only holding everyone accountable for that same bar, we're missing all the things that are going on beneath there. And you're missing the kids' growth above that. So that's where the growth and proficiency really come into play. When you can cross through from kindergarten all the way through 12 and look at what other local assessments are you administering universally and benefit from that, you're able to really make decisions that are much more anchored to evidence. In our framework, the projection comes from, you have your fixed standards. We use that to make projections for every individual student, and those projections will be based on every student's prior year of data points. So if they've taken reading and math in the fall and the winter and the spring and then the state test, it'll vary by grade level. they could have 6, 8, 10 data points that set up their projection. And then we look at local norms and say, what would we expect? What's the projected achievement for a student like Gina, who has the same performance history, right? And then when I am actually receiving my score, the model's going to we'll collect that data and we're going to analyze it. And then we express that difference as an effect size. So we look at what was expected, what did every student actually score. We standardize that so it's expressed as an effect size for growth. So the model is actually built to reflect typical growth, and that's the key to improvement. If you don't know where you're supposed to go, and you're just pulling like an arbitrary number of I want to increase by 3% or 4% each year, there's some confounding factors there. They're different kids. They're not even the same kids across the grade level. Some grade level standards are more difficult than others to meet. And when you do that, you are able to make a descriptive statement about the district, but you can't make any kind of a statement that anchors you to what worked. You can't make a statement about your improvement efforts. To do that, you have to have local norms, and you have to know what you would have gotten anyway, like if you didn't implement that math. So here, once we've done that and we have created individual projections, we're able to actually visualize them. This is a typical scatter plot that the administrators will all be very, very well trained in looking at. But this allows you to look at local norms. The blue lines in this sample scatter would indicate what's typical. Okay? The line that is horizontal, the green bar horizontal, that represents the proficiency bar. So you have growth. The blue lines are your local growth norms. The green line is proficiency. The x-axis is where kids start. It's their baseline score. We create a composite score with that. And then on the left, the y-axis will be whatever test we're going to make a projection to. And we're going to project to every single test for every single individual student. And the goal is they have to outperform the model if you're looking for improvement. If they hit their projections and you say, I have 80% of the kids that met their growth projections, that's only good enough for the kids if you like where they are as it relates to proficiency. They're below the proficiency bar, they have to outperform their growth. So growth is the means to get to proficiency. And I heard one of the earlier presenters say it, and it's true that proficiency is still the ultimate aim, but growth is how you get there. And the key to growth, don't measure growth just for the sake of measuring growth. Measure growth so you can anchor it to what was your improvement effort that worked. What lever did I pull that actually caused you to grow and outperform? So you have to be able to link it to your local efforts. And here's a visualization of this. So here, see, they're lined up beautifully in the middle of that river. That's the projections based on your local norms. We know where every student's likely to land unless you do something different, and that's the key. Okay, if all they do is hit their projection, their growth will be pretty close to zero. When they take their tests, each time we receive the data, we're going to plot where they actually landed. Kids that land between the blue lines are somewhere in the typical range. It's what was expected. It's in a normal, standard error range, what was expected. If they're above that blue line anywhere, they grew at higher than expected rates. If they're below it, they grew at lower than expected rates. And then you can see across the continuum, left to right, you can have growth above, high growth and low growth, and they can be both above or below that green line. So the key here is you have to look at growth and proficiency together. Once we've captured growth, we do it at the individual level, and that upper left corner there is then we're able to aggregate it. So for this particular grade level and test, the growth was 0.06, for example. It's an effect size green. We'd like to color code things to make it simple. So then we say, well, how much growth has to occur, and what's the inference? What can we learn from this? The first thing we do when we actually receive the data and we evaluate the growth is we run 2 tests. We want to make sure we're not overinterpreting or misinterpreting data. So we first test it, is the difference from what was expected significant? So we test that for significance. If it isn't, stays as it is. It stays, well, it must be in the expected range. There's not enough evidence to say anything other than what was expected occurred. Okay, so we leave it there and we say it's just typical or as expected. If that test is significant, we then look at the magnitude. Well, how big of a shift from zero? How big is the effect size? And then we color scheme, it's just color coded. If they're within a band of absolute values of 0.3, it's going to stay green, expected. 0.30 and the positive 0.3 is what everybody here is probably going to be interested in. You're going to want to see blue growth. If you don't like where the kids are, you have to grow them faster. They have to catch up. If you're looking at a subgroup that have been historically performing lower than the rest of the students in that grade, they have to grow faster. If they all continue to grow at consistent rates, that gap will never close. So you have to increase that. And then there's 2 levels of lower than expected growth. And the colors are really the way we try to, train people. Of course, you want to look at the effect size as well, but blue growth is providing you evidence. And when you're actually able to keep track and roster the kids that are in particular programs intervention, and now you look at a whole grade level, and you say, well, just show me the kids that we, just had at that after-school intervention. How did they grow? You have at your fingertips the ability to actually create an effect size for growth and have evidence whether your programs have worked or not. So that model or that system really is very systemic. You can apply that to many different functions within the school district. It can be used to help with placement if you're not sure what students are eligible or might do well in advanced placement or different levels. The way we create these composite scores for students is very powerful, very robust, because we're looking at every student on their entire prior year of data and comparing that to historical norms across many years. Gives you pretty good, pretty powerful information where they're likely to end up. So personalizing learning, course placement, RTI and MTSS, one of the most powerful utilities for this is individual student monitoring. You're going to evaluate whether you picked the right intervention. If I'm having a difficult time, I'm a student, I'm reading, and you say, well, let's try this intervention, you're going to know whether it worked or not, with evidence. So it's all about really shifting from what is oftentimes very difficult to do and really building off of that evidence-based culture and using the decision to help inform, or the data to help inform your decisions. So this is a screenshot really of there's a dashboard within the school improvement app that will give a very high level for the district and for every school. They'll be able to go through grade and subject, for each subject, each grade, each test, to say overall what happened, what number of students, what percentage of them met the proficiency benchmark, how was their growth, and then that far right column is an interactive column. They can actually click on and interact with the subgroups and drill in and create different groups if they're focusing on a particular group of students. So it can be used for goal setting. We're going to talk more about that. So you're going to talk about it's a different way to think about it when it comes to, we refer to them as being more dynamic and using projection-based goals because it's anchored to the evidence. But MTSS and RTI I talked about, and to really evaluate, the key here is it can evaluate the impact of your improvement efforts, and that's what I think you're after. You're going to improve this district one student at a time. And so when you have the ability to look one student at a time and understand their trajectory and know it in the beginning of the year where they're likely to be next spring, unless you do something different, it's pretty powerful because now you can really reel that into RTI and MTSS and do something different. So what we provide for principals in the beginning of the school year are these projection-based goal-setting reports. We call them projections to proficiency. So every school will be able to look at this and say, if I don't do anything different, my highest level across all the kids and grades, this is a percent that are likely to hit that proficiency bar. Now, we go a step further. We don't just look at the IAR from 3 to 8. We go all the way down to kindergarten if you have MAP in this district, and we've done equating studies. So what does a student in first grade have to hit to indicate they're on track for that third grade proficiency bar? So we layer it all the way down into the primary grades. And now you have a way to set goals that are not just an arbitrary 3%, 4% increase from last year. They're anchored to the same kids. They're anchored to your local norms. And local norms really capture all the things that make you who you are. It captures your teaching staff, the resources you have, the curriculum that you're running through the district, your policies, your procedures, the programs you're offering, and it standardizes that. Once you've done that and we've created what typical growth looks like, you've really standardized all of those elements. And now you have those fixed standards, and your aim is to outperform the model. You have to beat it. So we provide that, very sound, to say if you do nothing different, school A is likely to have 47% meet. That's not good enough, and you want to show evidence that the shift was significant and meaningful, they have to outperform it by that standard error. So the new report or the new scorecard that is being developed right now is going to use this sort of a metric to set goals. This is going to allow you to anchor it to statements about improvement efforts as opposed to just a descriptive statement about the district. And we talked about this earlier, that the scorecard is really yes, it's about governance. It's about the board and the district leadership being able to better govern. You're able to better evaluate, what did we say we were committed to do strategically and monitor that progress, but also communicate. It's going to allow you to communicate pretty easily to your community and your parents, your families, and brand the district based on the things you're measuring. Anything to add to what I presented first? Or?
I just think perspective on, obviously this is a bit of a different way of thinking for us because we really have had a history of looking at one point of data and making decisions based on that one point of data. And one thing that you've seen us do, and hopefully we are improving in this area, is to come forward with Plan, Do, Study, Acts, or PDSAs, to demonstrate to you that we are thoughtful about when we bring on new initiatives, when we are doing different things, that we are looking at metrics in some sort of areas to determine how we are growing. I know we scared everybody away.
I was going to say.
Waiting for who else is going to leave at this point. So thank you for my brave individuals who are staying.
I'm glad we don't have to vote on anything right now.
All in favor? No.
Okay.
But we do know that this is complex, and this is a different way of thinking. We're bringing in local norms to a formula that we have not, done before. But what we're trying to do is to get down to a deeper level of analytics so we can start, as Gina said, to look at things from the student perspective and also truly start measuring what is working and what is not working in our organization. We also do recognize, though, that this is going to be quite a bit of training. So we have rolled out a timeline from now until November. In January 25th specifically, all of our principals will be joining us, and Kate will be coming from ECRA to truly be, I'm sorry, in June 25th. On June 25th, the principals will be joining us, and Kate will guide them through really 2.5 hours of fairly intense training to start to understand these concepts, understand these analytics, and then the rest of the day really for principals to start absorbing that, to get into their own platform, start looking at previous data, to get used to this way of thinking and this way of decision making. We're going to bring them back again in August with assistant principals and possibly members of REA to also join us in a second tier of discussion, a refresher course, and a more deeper look at our data and information in this same format, and invite them back again in October to have a third tier of training, which will then include our preliminary data, and our entire scorecard will be populated at that time. But again, we're really excited to be working with ECRA. We're excited to have this level of expertise and really a platform that is both user-friendly but very student-focused and specific that we can now use to focus our district priorities and tier and align them throughout our entire organization. And as I said to you, this is just your first of many trainings on the scorecard as a whole. Unlike our previous Saturday afternoons of intensive, training, we thought just sort of breaking this apart and scaffolding the training would be better for us to absorb what the scorecard and the different platforms are going to look like this year. So this is just your first. You will not be tested now.
Okay.
We will wait and have your future assessments based on both growth and proficiency. But if you do have any questions just now about the platform or our partnership with ECRA or anything that we presented now, we are here for discussion.
Mr. Rollins, you have your light on first.
So we currently get growth projections through NWA, the MAP process. How do these differ? Are we going to be using both? Are we going to substitute the ECRA projections for the NWA? How's that going to work?
That's a really good question, and that's one of the first questions that we'll be answering in each school as well. So they can work complementary, but they answer two very different questions. So NWA is a benchmark assessment. It's intended to give you a benchmark of where your kids perform relative to other students across the nation. So that's all it's going to give you. And not all. I mean, it's important. It answers a different question. It's answering a question about really the relative positioning, but competition. If you look at a high level, what's our average national percentile really allows you to know how you compete. At the individual level, it's benchmarking them against the nation. We will use MAP data. It's very reliable. It's a great instrument. We model it with many of our districts, but we're going to go across MAP and Park. We're going to use your formal assessment program, meaning all of those assessments, to create a more sophisticated framework that is going to anchor more to your improvement initiatives. So when you look, and there are some really key differences in terms of even how they look at growth. They're going to look at a single predictor, and they're going to make a projection based on their national norms, and then when they receive that score for each student, that growth is actually binary. It's whether they met it or not, which is why you can get a report that 70 or 80% of your students met their growth projection. That is not in any relationship to proficiency, though, so you don't know how many of those kids are above or below proficiency. Our framework, we use that same data, but we're going to use 8, 9, 10 data points from the prior year. We're going to anchor it to your local norms, so our projection is going to be very precise based on your own local performance here and on that individual students. The projection is personalized for every student. It's not just plucking it out of the national norms. And when you receive growth, it's a continuous metric, so you're actually able to look at that. If a student hits their growth projection in ECRA's model, their growth is 0. It means they hit consistent with what was expected. That is only good enough if you like where they are, if they're above or below the proficiency bar. So our reports will always report whether they met proficiency or not as well. You use them not in isolation, but together. So we will use multiple data points anchored to local norms, and your growth is a continuous metric. So those are sort of the key things. You're going to use our growth to know whether your programs, whether the interventions, the strategies a teacher chose to implement in a particular group of students, our growth is going to answer that question. What impact did that strategy have? MAP will answer the question of how do you compete at a high level, and an individual student level, it will answer how they benchmark against kids in that grade nationally. They use complementary.
And logistically, to answer your question, we're going to use both because we don't want to stop, sort of the powerful information that we've had right now and that we've shared with staff. We don't want to take that away. We don't want to take that story away. So we're going to look at it both, and like Gina said, to determine which question we are answering. We are actually starting tomorrow hosting a conversation with both parties. So we're going to be on a call tomorrow with both ECRA and NWEA MAP, just to make sure that as we're moving forward, we're articulating, the difference in the usability of both of those systems. So to answer your question, no, we're not going to stop using MAP or stop the progress that we've made. We're going to introduce the new concept of ECRA and the multiple points of data and use both.
Okay, so if we move down this road and start using this model, where does that information reside? Does ECRA have it? Do we have it? Do they teach us how to do it? Are we wedded to them in perpetuity?
For the growth, yes. For the growth, the analytics, that is something that ECRA will run. It'll be available in that school improvement app that we had shown you a screenshot of earlier. So it's in an intelligence platform that the leadership will all have access to. And within the buildings, they'll all have access to that.
But what you're asking, the logic that is built behind in the platform itself is run solely by ECRA. So we filter the data to them. That's what we're doing right now as we speak. So we send the data to them. We have created the district priorities and the rating and the scale, essentially the point system that we want. We've given that to ECRA. They build the platform. They do the data analytics for us. And then the platform is accessible to all of us.
And we actually do have the data available to give to them?
Correct.
We're at least at that point?
Yes, we are, Tim.
Yes, correct. The only data that we are not able to give to them at this point is the embargo data. So the data that is not yet accessible to us, so SAT, IAR, but we have already given them that data from previous years. So we already have trend data built into this platform, and then as soon as it becomes available to us, we will also share that with ECRA. So in November, when you see the fully populated scorecard dashboard, you will see, in most cases, at least 3 years of trend data across all of these analytics. So we've been doing MAP for 3 years. There'll be 3 years of MAP data, IAR, PARC, SAT, all of that will be in there for multiple years. And yes, we do have access to the data. And Jeff, actually on my team, Jeff Lowry, has been working with our IS team diligently over the past week. This is week 2 for Jeff, but he's jumping right in. They have been working with both our internal data, the state level, and our third-party partners to facilitate that conversation. And so we are about 85% complete as far as our data filtering.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Connor?
To quickly follow up on that, since you brought it up, the data coming back, if you will, is coming from multiple sources. Will that physically be stored here, the results? So I understand you have different sources that will run it, but the result sets will be physically stored here, and where would that be? Like within Decision Ed or someplace else?
So Decision Ed right now hosts all of our current data. So that data is there. And a lot of the data we are just filtering right from Decision Ed onto one, back to ECRA.
But I'm thinking back in.
And then they bring the data back in, and then we have access to it through their platform that they are creating.
So part of the way the contract was written is if they run updates, making it up once a quarter or whatever, when that's done, then we get that back. We get a history file, I assume, right? So we'll always have, if you will, the snapshot data so that we could see those changes. And our so that we really have this over a long period of time once we.
Yes. There's a document library that's an archival of all the reports, all the
Yeah.
analyses, and then within the actual interactive portion where they can actually drill in and look at individual kids, that will just hold all the historical years. You can pick and filter.
And when you say
across
that
years.
will hold, is that at the ECRA site?
It is.
It is.
It's the
So
ECRA
will we not get that detail, or is that
Yeah.
detail we've already had? I'm thinking of the framework of it, so that if you do, if you have intellectual property on how you do things.
Yes.
I'm more thinking of the things coming back. Again, I'm less concerned, frankly, in one way about it going out. It's really coming back so that we could do our own analysis off the raw data. Because one of the things I'm going to ask you is, predictive analytics can mean a lot of different things. And so that's why, in part I'm asking so that we have our own independent view, especially of the raw data, not just the conclusion.
So yes, you will always own the raw data. You just share it with us and we analyze it. We analyze it with our
Right.
formulas that are proprietary to ECRA. And we
Right.
can create reports that report out what we found through our analysis, but you'll always
Right.
have access to the raw data.
Well, I didn't say that right, is that, of course, we have the raw data because we're supplying it. But I'm thinking of, like, a lot of times what you'll do is you'll do some lightly summarized view by some category or what have you. And even though we don't have your IP, intellectual property, we still get some of that back, right? So that if I do some analysis and I'm looking at the scorecard, by early childhood or whatever the category is, that a lot of times you'll be doing something and having that data. I'm thinking of that. I apologize, I should have been clearer, as result set data is that we could do our own analysis, not just what you provide us. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Kind of like,
I think it's important to note, too, that the ECRA is only involved with the data analytics. That is only with our MAP and IAR for K through 8, and PSAT and SAT for high school. So that is data we're sending, and they do the data analytics just on that part. The rest of the scorecard components, which we'll share over the next few months, we are filtering that data, and they are adding it to the dashboard. There is no other predictive analytics done. This is data that we have given to them with a scale that we've created and identified and a rating system that we have identified internally. They are just utilizing the platform for display and for trend data.
Because that was going to be
We've done that. We've done that behind the scenes.
That's what was confusing me, because I'm thinking, are they going to do the entire thing? Because as I was looking through it, I thought, so is this a different scorecard than what we've been talking about for, the various schools and so forth?
All one and the same. So it's all one and the same. So what we're going to do is roll out, we have been able to consolidate it partially because of the predictive analytics, but also because we've been able to really streamline our focus area on very specific district priorities. So we have one scorecard that covers all K through 8, one for high school, one for early childhood. And within those indicators, we still have quality instruction and climate and culture. The predictive analytics are just for the growth and proficiency, just in those first two scorecards, not early childhood. And just for those two indicators.
As I looked at the scorecard, that's what was kind of.
That was easy. That was needed.
Yeah, okay.
Good question.
We've got all the component parts, and any result sets that we might want to use are either a report or something that we might get back.
Correct. And we'll do other analytics such as, so we're going to run some correlation reports between engagement and, school achievement. So there's other things we'll do.
Because you don't know what variables are going to affect, that's why.
Absolutely. So we'll do that in addition to the scorecard. We'll be having those conversations throughout.
Okay, all right, nerd moment, thank you very much.
No, we appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
I think this is a question for you, Kelly. We have been talking about helping the organization get better at academic return on investment, and actually are going to bring somebody in to help us with that or whatever. But will the program evaluation you talk about help with that, with defining whether or not Mrs. Detman brings a new program to us to spend a whole bunch of money on, whether or not that program is effective in raising the achievement scores.
So DMG, District Management Group, is going to come in and build capacity within our organization to do training so that we understand how to determine ROI or return on investment, or in this case, academic ROI, academic return on investment. So we will receive extensive training through that facilitation, and through that, we will have a better understanding on how to approach the conversation. Where ECRA can meet us in the middle is they can provide the template to demonstrate the analytics of the result of that return on investment. Okay. So this is where our partners will be able to cross, because we will receive the training again and identify which areas of focus, and then ECRA will be able to support us in another platform that they have that we can actually run through the predictive analytics. So they'll be complementary.
My second question is, we're only as good as how well we implement something, and so the implementation of scorecards is really going to be dependent on principals buying into the process. And I don't know how else to say this, but there's an emotion that I'm worried about that principals may start to, and maybe you've talked about this, that's my question. How do you prepare the principals when you meet with them to, here's your new scorecard, here's your tool, you know, whatever, that they don't panic and are in this fear mode of, oh my God, what am I going to do now, you know, or whatever. And it's all about accountability and responsibility, and I don't know if I even asked the question right, but I'm worried about
I understand
the rollout of the emotional part of having a scorecard to be accountable. Maybe that's a Dr. Jarrett question. I don't know.
Well, and I think you asked two questions, because your first part of the question I want to address, because you talked about fidelity. And I think fidelity of implementation of anything combined with communication are two key points of success of any type of initiative. One thing I can say is that we have prefaced and really rolled this scorecard out over 3 years now. Really trying to, ensure buy-in and embrace the concept of the scorecard. So this is not a new conversation for anyone in our organization. But I will turn the conversation over to Dr. Jarrett. What we have been doing, and we've isolated more time to do it in the best way we can, is that we've elicited support from communications, and our entire leadership team now meets multiple times a week to develop an extensive communication plan to ensure that we do our true due diligence on rolling this out in a very supportive, non-threatening, highly communicative way. And I think that is the success to not just the scorecard, but any initiative that we do in our organization and any organization.
And I don't want to, I really think our building leaders need to have accountability for the progress, and that's part of, being good at their leadership skills. So.
And the exciting part about this is that the priorities that we developed within this scorecard was truly collective. So we had a series of both mandatory meetings through all principal meetings that they have scheduled throughout the months, but also through volunteer meetings where we invited principals to come and share in the conversation to ensure that our priorities match their priorities. And that is how we came up with a collective scorecard. That is where we came with it. We did use ESSA. We used truly the Empower ESSA standards to ensure that we were matching, when possible, what the final outcomes will be based on their, at least former, formula, to ensure that the designations that we receive annually match what we are doing here, so that we are talking about one and the same priorities. But it really was collective. But I really have to go back that we are really now ensuring that we do our due diligence to make sure that that communication plan is clear and concise. And we have a unified message, both on the compelling why did we go down this journey, but equally important, what is it going to mean when it is rolled out.
Okay.
And that's why we have the June, the August, and the October trainings, and then we'll have trainings throughout the school year as well. And our continuous improvement team has committed to going through and meeting with schools individually to ensure that they understand the data, that they embrace it, that they can tell their own school story. We'll be there to support them along the way as well. That's the commitment that we have. Okay. So I don't know if you want to add
anything to that? Okay. Okay, good. Any other board members? Mr. Connor?
Very quickly, on what Mr. Scrivano said, except at the staff level, and we've talked about this a little, but I think, if I might say so, I think there's one aspect is the principals, because now they are going to be accountable.
Right.
But I think the feedback we've all received on how all this has come down, in other words, the emphasis on academics. I mean, I'm really hearing more at that teacher level, frankly, and perhaps somewhat staff, but really teacher level. So I would say on something like this, that might be, even more so an area to really engaged, frankly, with the REA on that. And I know, I'm not saying that you haven't, I'm just saying that I would echo Mr. Scrivano, except with an underlining for that.
Sure, good point.
Teacher
Good
point.
point.
Yeah.
I agree.
Anybody else? Okay,
Thank you very much.
more to come.
More.
All right. Next, we have Mrs. Height Carter, Student Code of Conduct.
Okay, good evening. Hope everyone's still awake.
Okay.
Okay, I will try to make this as brief as possible, but I know we have some serious things we do have to cover. So I want to make sure, first of all, you have all the documents in front of you. Before we begin, you should have a red line copy and then actually a black line copy of the new proposed revisions. You should also have a copy of the PowerPoint. You should have a copy of the recommended changes. And you should also have a copy of a specific recommendation of change regarding cell phone usage. Okay, all right. Well, anyway, this is the actual presentation for the adoption for the fiscal Y 2020 Student Code of Conduct for Rockford Public Schools. This adoption, once again, complies with Illinois School Code in reference to Public Act 990456, which we also refer to as Senate Bill 100, as well as it supports the equity awareness measures aligned to Public Act 10014. We have divided the PowerPoint or the presentation into 6 areas: parent, school, community, safe schools, working together, student data outcomes. Our social interventions, corrective strategies, and our reparative practices are basically our recommendations for the Student Code of Conduct for 2020, and then also training. The parent, school, community aspect covers 4 areas. We basically, first of all, discuss our Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee, which is required under Illinois School Code to be conducted annually. We usually do that between the months of January through March. And this particular area provides parents with a voice to assist the board in the development and the adoption of the Student Code of Conduct for the following school year. Parents have voiced their concerns nationally with bullying and feeling safe at school as their top priority of concern. And through the Federal Commission on School Safety, the Secretary of Education has championed the following topics for research and action across the nation: cyberbullying, social media, and youth consumption of violent entertainment. Inclusive of that, our National School Climate Center has focused topics on bullying and feeling safe. In regards to Rockford Public Schools parents who have had students who have actually been involved in a particular incident have stressed that mental health and trauma exposure were indicators in terms of their students' behaviors. Also, parents with students who have been cited as victims have also referenced our department as well as the superintendent's office and other forms of communication to the district as bullying and threats being their number one concern. In terms of schools and parents, access to controlled substances as well as social media use have been their top priorities in terms of concerns regarding safety in schools. So what are safe schools? Safe schools are considered to be pathways in terms of preventive intervention and restorative practices. And within this current Student Code of Conduct, we actually focus on several components that we try to present to parents as well as students in terms of maintaining school climates that are conducive to learning. Those objects that we actually try to deter are listed there next to the big red X, such as objects that are prohibited on school grounds, bullying, harassment, physical altercations, access to controlled substances, verbal abuse, and truancy. The behaviors that we attempt to promote within our schools are respect, responsibility, safety, and reparative practice and progressive interventions, along with additional building character and reparative practice within the classroom in terms of school teachers. When you look at the 4 areas that we're mainly concerned with in terms of addressing in our Student Code of Conduct, safety is our top priority. And then we go to support communication, as well as making sure the students understand that we care. and then challenge and engagement, and then social emotional competencies. In summary, the RPS Student Code of Conduct ensures that students are physically and emotionally safe, school environments are orderly, students are continuously engaged in their learning process, and social interaction with peers are positive. Students are also encouraged in self-regulation, perceptual control theory, which is part of our ACS model, and understand the importance of treating everyone fairly and equitably. Our component on working together basically addresses our tier interventions because our Student Code of Conduct is progressive in nature. So we start with our minors, which basically is part of the classroom support and teacher management system. Our majors are where the actual principals are involved in terms of supporting teachers and engaging with parents to develop student success plans. And then our egregious behaviors, which are the behaviors that come before the board, are known for whether or not we need to place students in alternative settings or provide additional support systems for their behaviors. The key here is connecting parents, teachers, and students and the governing aspect of the RPS Student Code of Conduct for progressive support systems. Student data outcomes. This year, the Student Code of Conduct has additional information to share regarding student data outcomes. And this is due to the Illinois State Report on Student Discipline, whereby it has identified specific areas beyond the normal scope of minors, tiers 2s and tiers 3s and tier 4s. These categories basically reflect suspensions, expulsions, and racial disparities. And what the state of Illinois provided for all school districts was they wanted school districts to be aware of whether or not they were placed in the top 20% in these particular three categories. Rockford Public Schools, our excitement, only placed in the top 20% in one of the categories, and that happens to be the one that was listed first, suspensions. Expulsions and racial disparities, we did not report data that allowed us to fall within the top 20%. In addition to the area that we did report in the top 20%, which is suspensions, Rockford Public Schools continues to show a significant decline overall in suspensions since school year 2009. And just for the record, there are 852 public school districts as of July 21st in the state of Illinois. And so I think that this information is valuable to show that we are continuing on a positive trend. So the state reporting system for our suspension trends show that Rockford Public Schools had a slight increase last year in terms of out-of-school suspension incidences as well as students involved in incidences. We had an increase of approximately 565 more incidences than we had in 2017, but overall we still show a significant decline of 62% since 2009 in out-of-school suspensions. In terms of state reported suspension trends, the last 3 years of 2016, 2017, and 2018, this is information that's provided by the state, shows our suspension rate. We are still lower than what we were in 2016, coming in at a rate of suspension of 0.248841, and our expulsion rate continues to show a significant decline of 0.02823. And respectively, those numbers are incidences for 2018 was 7,141, and students involved in the incident were 3,289 respectively. And that's with an enrollment of 26,800 and something students. On this slide, the state also wanted to report to districts the disparities between ethnicity enrollment. So with this particular slide here, we show the numbers of students that are white students enrolled within this public school or within our public school, Rockford Public Schools, and then the color enrollment. So as you can see, we are for the year 2018, we had 8,698 students that were enrolled, and out of those students, those that were expelled or suspended were 1,154. With the color enrollment, we had 19,999 students, and out of those students, 6,068 students were expelled or suspended, and so we did not make the top 20% within that particular category. On the goal slide, we see the ethnicity groups and ratio percentages by the percentages. So what we did was we took the 2018 white and color, and we came up with 13% percentage for the white students and 30% for the color students, which did not land RPS in the top 20%. In terms of our local data, student code of conduct data outcomes for minors in tier 2s, as you can see, we actually decided to provide the board with year-to-date data. So this was as of May 17, 2019, and it looks like we're going to be coming a little under in our minors. Those are classroom disruptions, and we're also going to be probably right on par with our tier 2 support systems for 2008 versus 2017. The next slide shows our Tier 3 and our gross disobedience Level 4 behaviors. Our Tier 3s, we had a slight increase from our previous year, and we actually did some research to determine exactly where those behaviors were and what they entailed, and the majority of them were our failure to accept the assigned discipline at the Level 2, which then resulted in those behaviors escalating up to the Level 3. And particularly, those behaviors are detention, students who refuse to serve detention, or students who were involved in a sexual harassment without misconduct behavior. We also noticed a slight increase in our Level 4, and when we did the research on that, the board probably is aware of this as well, but we did attribute that to the students' ability to access THC oil as well as vaping devices. In terms of fighting and group violence, we have showed a decline in students behaving in aggressive behaviors, so that is great news. In terms of last year, we had a slight increase from 2017, but it looks like we're going to be coming a little bit lower than that on 2019. And then our bullying and threats, we're showing a significant decline from last year, although we had a slight increase between 2017 and 2018 in terms of bullying and threats. Interventions, corrective strategies. This is a section on the recommendations. The top recommendations came in 6 different categories: altering records, cell phone policy, computer violations, controlled substance abuse, social media, and sexual harassment. Now, the pages numbers that I have provided for you are within the elementary section of the Student Code of Conduct, but the language is repetitive in the secondary section. So at this time, I would like to refer you all to your recommended changes, but I thought because of the time that we would focus first on the cell phone policy, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So, what has been proposed or recommended is that we identify the particular interventions that we expect administrators and teachers to follow regarding our cell phone policy usage. So we've basically maintained the same language regarding when electronic devices can be utilized within the classroom or within the school setting. However, in the past, as you know, we had a long list of appropriate minor interventions listed on the side of the Student Code of Conduct, and they were randomly used with teachers. What the recommendation that was presented to us is requesting is that we provide specific steps, first, second, and third occurrences for these particular cell phone uses. So we're asking for progressive intervention for all electronic devices violations, with the first offense being confiscated and returned to parent or legal guardian, with the second offense resulting in confiscation and return to parent or legal guardian, cell phone prohibited for 1 week. The third offense, confiscated and returned to parent or legal guardian, and cell phone prohibited for 1 semester. And then the fourth offense being referred to gross disobedient Level 2, failure to accept the assigned discipline program for a Level 1 or a minor offense. Thank you.
I'm just looking at the handout, actually.
Yeah, I gave them a handout too as well on it,
Yeah.
so that way. And then what we're also proposing,
Okay.
I'm sorry, What we're also proposing to ensure that this information is communicated to parents, is that we provide the parents with a 4x5 card during registration, as well as when parents have, a first or a second violation, to remind them of the importance of following the Pacific electronic device usage policy, and also making them aware of the consequences that will result in violations of that policy.
So are we going to take each of these sections separately, or are we just doing it all at the end, Ken?
Well, like I said, I would like to, if it's okay with the committee of the whole, basically just get through the training section and then come back to this one, if that's okay?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, because this is the major cell phone policy usage is a major change besides the other ones that I listed in terms of altering records, computer violations, and controlled substance. So then the last section of the presentation is basically our training, and as you all know, we're required, according to Illinois School Code, to properly train any administrators that is going to be executing student discipline within the public school setting. So we start our administrative training in August, and we also offer volunteer trainings throughout the year from my office in conjunction with the legal department, as well as the special education department. Secondly, we provide parent community forums beginning in September, where we actually go out to local community agencies and organizations and present to them an overview of the Student Code of Conduct to ensure that we are maintaining safe schools. Third, we actually provide student orientations. Some of those orientations begin even before school begins, specifically with those students who have had egregious behaviors or they are returning, in terms of developing their transition plans as they enter into the school year, and making sure that those student success plans are established appropriately for those students. After school begins, the general population of students are presented with an overview of the new Student Code of Conduct via their English courses at the secondary level and class visits with the elementary principals. And then lastly, the teachers are actually trained during Teacher Institute updates on the Student Code of Conduct in reference to classroom management strategies and appropriate minor interventions within the classroom. So getting back to this page, okay, which are the additional language changes, we're going to first then reference any questions on the cell phone policy usage.
Ms. McCullough? Okay. I got two. Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, I have examples of expected behaviors speaks to the fact that electronic items can be stowed away during school. The school shall provide a secure location for all electronic devices. And what is that secure location? And when you say that, is that meant that when they walk in the door, they can ask to have them put away, or are you talking about when they're confiscated?
Well, since cell phone usage or the policy is in the minor area, the school administration can determine exactly where the students can actually have the cell phones during the normal school day, but in the classroom, the authority, then is deferred to the classroom teacher. So if the classroom teacher is doing the confiscating, then they would actually have to have an appropriate means.
The teacher would have to.
The teacher would have to. And that's also part of our 4.100R regulations. It discusses that confiscation process, and it provides the specific steps that have to be taken if we're going to be confiscating electronic devices. And so we would make sure that each one of the schools, all of our schools are aware of this particular policy and follow it appropriately.
So when we had a conversation about this, I know I sat down with legal and Dr. Vosberg and Ms. Carter, and we talked about what some of the schools are using to help keep the phones out of students' hands during the classroom time. And at that point in time, Dr. Vosberg said that there would be a budget so that schools can purchase, for example, the Yonder pouches. We had this conversation. I see you shaking your head. Ms. Holy was there. We talked about a budget so that the schools who wanted to purchase something so that they could secure them would be able to do so. And then after that, there was, we're going to have site-based budgeting, and they can use it out of their own. But the whole purpose of the conversation was, how can we steer administrators to show them that we're going to support them from a central level so that the administrators at the high schools especially, but also at middle schools, can then support their teachers. Because right now, we have this policy. And we're not enforcing this policy because the teachers say that the administrators don't back them, and the administrators say, well, you know, what are we going to do? Dr. Vosberg has understandably spoken to the issue of their expensive devices, but it clearly states in here if a child chooses to bring it to school, then it's their responsibility. So we're not. My understanding is at this point in time, and I'll give you a second here in a minute to speak to it, but I don't know that we're giving the administrators the tools that they need or the opportunity to purchase what they need to make this a successful rollout, because realistically, we're rolling out the idea or the concept that we're going to actually enforce a policy that we've had for many years. And as to achievement, it's clear if you read any of the articles that are out there, and I can send you a couple dozen, that it does interfere with achievement in school. It's not like passing notes in the old days. I'm sorry, I've heard that before. Well, we used to pass notes. It's not the same as passing notes because there's social media. They're watching movies. They're listening to music. They have Bluetooth earbuds. They're cheating. You know, they're using them for a lot of purposes. The other concern I have, and so I'm going to state that one as well so you can speak to both, is the conversation was that we could confiscate the phone, and they've done this in other districts, and that's where the tiered levels are, you know, first for a week and then, you know, month and a semester. I think we said the year and it's back down to a semester, fine, but that they can come get them that the parents can come get them because we don't want to be responsible. Well, if we have secure locations that we're supposed to keep it, then we should be able to be responsible, first of all. And secondly, the whole concept that they're not supposed to have it in school for a month, who's going to know and monitor all the kids that got caught and are caught, whether or not they have it with them? I mean, what do the lunch aides get a list of who can have a phone with them or not, because that's the time they can have them out? And I will also say that I had asked, we had a conversation, that they should just not be out all day, even during lunch hour. Kids need to learn to communicate. They need to learn to socialize. They need to get off social media, socialize face-to-face. They need to not be burdened with all the things that are on social media that start. We have fights that escalate during the day because of social media. So this, to me, is very watered down compared to the conversation that we'd had. And so, you know, I might make some motions, but first I think it would be fair to hear why the changes, why we did, we're at where we're at.
So let's just, we'll go with the first question about the pouches, the yonder pouches. We did have a conversation about yonder pouches. I don't agree to having a district-wide purchase of yonder pouches. I wouldn't recommend that. We have a couple schools that have bought them and aren't using them on a regular basis, so I would not.
But there are schools that are, so you keep
Sure.
talking about the ones that aren't, and you don't talk about the ones that are. And we didn't say district-wide purchase, we said per school if they chose to use that.
They have the opportunity to do that, yes, and some schools will do that with their building budgets. They will buy the pouches. The second question about why we changed the policy and why we made adjustments. So we did have a little stronger language around confiscation and the school holding the phone for weeks and months and years. And we also had language in there that potentially banning them throughout the whole school day. I shared that information with principals. I got immediate responses that they didn't think that was realistic or enforceable. The consensus amongst the principals, and I have a group of assistant principals, so about 20 administrators that I've been talking to, has been our number one challenge right now is enforcing our current policy at the classroom level, that it's really inconsistent at the classroom level. And that's where our work's going to be for next year.
But the work at the classroom level is because the teachers don't feel supported at the administrative level.
I'm sure there are some teachers that feel that way. but I don't think that's the consensus. I don't have information that says a majority of teachers feel they're not getting supported at the administrative level. In fact, I do have a survey from a high school with 50 teachers participating in the survey, where about 7 teachers feel they don't get supported, but a majority do feel they get supported.
And a lot of this change, just for the rest of the board, emanated from, Ms. Munson's not here. You know, there was a survey done of the schools and the teachers, and there was a great percentage that thought it was impacting learning and achievement in school. And so the thought was, okay, then we need to actually enforce our code. There is nothing about years in here, Dr. Vosberg. We're talking, you've got it down to a semester would be the most that you confiscate a phone for.
Yeah, this is our recommendation based on the administrators in the building. This is what we're recommending.
And the piece about having a budget so that if buildings wanted to purchase some sort of yonder pouch or whatever it might be, so that, or some other secure way to put, to confiscate and hold a phone. If you have a building that is frugal, they may choose not to purchase that and try to do it on their own with whatever, Ziploc bags and the like. But if they thought that the district was going to help support that, because they felt like the district was really, and the board was really making an effort to support them in this whole push, for lack of a better word, they may be more likely to purchase something than they would if it's coming out of their building budget. So. You don't feel so?
They could, but they could also squander something that they didn't use their own money on. They could say, I really didn't want to use this, so I'm not going to, I didn't pay for it, so it's just going to sit in a closet. We did, as a district, provide a lot more funding at the school level than they've ever had. And so any school that would want to do this has the budget available to do it.
Well, our code says there's a secure location at each school. So do we have a secure location at each school? It shouldn't be an issue if we do have, supposedly.
If we confiscate the phones, we typically put them in a safe. We already do that. So we'll put them in the school safe. Because we are responsible for them once we take possession.
So we are able to do that?
We already do that.
All right, and we're able to tag it and put it into a safe.
Yes.
So if we were to confiscate for the week, for the month, or for the semester, they would go in the safe. We have a place to do that.
If that's what we wanted to do, that's not the recommendation from the administration.
So tell me how these administrators expect to monitor a student who's not supposed to have a phone in the building for a week, a month, or a year. What are they going to do? I mean, do they have a red patch across their thing? I don't get a cell phone.
That's a good
I get
question.
a green one, I get a blue one, depending on how long it's for, with a date on it.
That's a good question. We would monitor it like we do students who are suspended from school and shouldn't be in the building. We circulate a communication every day. Here's the students that are suspended from school. Here's the students that are supposed to be in SILE. Here's the students that should not be in possession of a cell phone today. And then we count on teachers to help us enforce that, because they get the list every day, and they check that and make sure that the kids that are on the list are not in the building or with a cell phone.
And so do all the people in the lunchroom get this list to know that the student shouldn't have the cell phone in there as well? Because that would be the place that they really be used.
Well, they can still use them in the lunchroom if they're using it for school purposes.
We're not using them in the lunchroom for school purposes. But the students who are not supposed to be using a cell phone in the building, not supposed to have them there at all, physically, right? That's what it says. That's what the code says. They're not supposed to have it in the building. How are you going to enforce that
in the lunchroom?
In the lunchroom.
Okay. Each lunch period, there's an administrator on duty, and so it would be their responsibility to be aware of students on that list. Are they going to see every student in a cafeteria of 500 students? Probably not, but they would have the list and know if a student should or should not have the phone.
Again, we want to give them the tools to enforce this. And by allowing them to carry them into the building, instead of our having put, and we're going to have burners, and we're going to have watches. So we're going to have other ways, other things to look at besides this phone. But I don't think we're giving them the tools that they need. If you have 500 kids in a lunchroom, you just said to me they're not going to see it.
It's not, their recommendation would not be to be concerned about the lunchroom. In fact, they feel that kids use the phones in a pretty productive way during lunchtime.
I hear you, but I'm saying that you're saying they're not supposed to have it in the building. And now you're double talking to me and saying, well, the administrators think it's okay that they use it in the lunchroom when it's when they're not supposed to have it in the building.
Is a student that is on the suspension, like prohibited list, they would be identified on that list. And if an administrator caught them with the phone, then there'd be a consequence for that. But I'm being realistic to tell you that with 500 students in a cafeteria, it's probably it's not a priority for them to look and see who has a cell phone at lunchtime.
Therefore, if their phone was in the office locked up, there's less likely that they would have it.
That is an alternative option if the board wants to pursue that. That's not the recommendation from the administration.
My one question is, what the progressive discipline says is that the parent or legal guardian is going to take responsibility to that phone. So I would think, most of those phones are not going to be left in the building. They're going to be returned to the parent.
Correct. Usually by the end of the day, but you'd be surprised how many would come up almost immediately to get the phone.
Get the phones.
Yeah. I would suspect that most parents, if their kid's phone is being taken away from them, they're going to come and get it because they're the one who paid for it.
Yes.
You know, whatever.
They want their kid to have it.
Yeah, I understand that. But so then they're going to have to reinforce what the rules are with their kid.
Right. I think one of the reasons I really support the administration's recommendation is that I think this facilitates parental partnership in the process. I think we really run the risk in confiscating an $800 item in some cases, or a $1,000 item in some cases, a very adversarial and confrontational situation, not just between the student and the teacher or administrator, but potentially with the parent in this case. And so we feel like by returning the phone to the parent, we feel like we are putting the onus of partnership back on the parent or guardian, as opposed to, I think in many, many cases, we'll have very, very adversarial exchanges with parents if we attempt to confiscate it. So while I completely agree with the importance of addressing this issue of cell phone addiction and overuse of cell phone during the day, I think the spirit behind this conversation is extremely important. I think what the administration has recommended to have the parent be a partner in this is why I ultimately support the administration's recommendation.
Mr. Connor.
Well, I actually have a different topic, but since you brought it up, the one thing I will say is I think just the discussion tonight brings up this is really going to be a communication issue, I think, right? You're going to have to really make sure that at essentially almost an individual level, whether it's through teachers or however you're going to do it, that there's a real sense of expectation with the students. I mean, and the parents or the family, whoever the guardians are, have to understand just what I've heard, the context and the rest of it. So that would be the one recommendation is, almost irrespective, I think, as Dr. Jarrett said, this could become confrontational, and I don't think that's, at least speaking for myself, what we want, but I'm fully sympathetic that we have to focus on the education side. So this is one where I think if we're going to put this in, we really have to do something, probably a little extra on that, so that the old saying in marketing is, even if you tell people 10 times, they're not going to necessarily hear it.
I agree with that, Mr. Connor. I think that's an excellent point. And one of the things we've noticed with all of our discipline successes, in most cases, you can draw a very strong line between the parent return conference being one of our most powerful tools.
Right.
And what I love about this procedure here is that it's encouraging the parent to return, which allows the administrator, the student, the parent to have a conversation, create a teachable moment, and hopefully build a coalition of support around the student's distracted behavior in the classroom. You know, ultimately, I think this is a very, very important topic for us to address. We certainly need high engagement from our students, and I think having that parental partnership by forcing the parent to, in some cases, be very inconvenienced, and then having progressive discipline is the other piece I really like about this. While it does start with just coming and getting the phone, by the third offense, losing that phone, the ability to use that phone for a semester, I think will be potentially a pretty strong deterrence for students, and has significantly upgraded the severity of the consequence according to the code. So I'm hopeful the combination of that parent partnership as well as progressive discipline will really lead to good parent communication along the way, Mr. Connor. I think that's extremely important.
I will say this. I really hope we don't get to that point. So one of the things I will say, and I know this is difficult, so what I'm asking is difficult, is I really think teacher engagement on this particular issue, because if teachers feel very strongly about their classroom, the onus is really on them. What I would not want to happen with this is this seen as an administrative thing. I mean, most of the discipline things, for good reason, at an administrative level is really where enforcement is in the rest, right? And it's not that teachers aren't engaged, but this is one that if somebody has a style and it really bugs them, I think you've got to have it so that the teachers feel real responsibility, almost unlike.
Right, that's the key right now, is consistency in classroom level enforcement. And we know we have a lot of work to do there. We have to be clear, as Mrs. McCulloch mentioned, that teachers feel supported when they enforce the rule.
Right.
So we did some things last year at the start of the year to let teachers know we're going to support them. But we need to reinforce that more this year. And we also need to follow through with teachers who aren't following it. In fact, I was talking to an administrator who did a classroom observation recently, and multiple students were on the phone during the observation, and teacher didn't intervene, and that goes in the evaluation. So we have to be consistent across the board in the classroom.
Yep. So actually, my question, sorry, I just.
thought you were done. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Was not on that, but if you look at your SIS 2020 SCOC adoption slides on 19 and 20, which is the state reporting suspension trends. Okay, that's where I'm at.
Or if you have to bring it back up.
This is in the presentation.
This is in the presentation, yeah. It says, it's the slides. Yeah, the one.
Page 21, maybe? Is that it?
Yeah, it says, the one that says adoption board presentation. Oh, right? Yeah. And on 19 and 20, so where it says white enrollment and color enrollment, are those terms that are standardized by the state, or are those terms that we made?
Yes, the state.
Huh?
That's the state.
Okay. Right, but so here's my comment is, because we get roundly criticized, and there's many groups in that, and I'm going to get my soapbox for a minute. One of the reasons on the census, it says Hispanic, which is not a race, very specifically says, you know, those that identify as people of color and those that don't. These numbers are misleading to me. And so what I'm going to say is either we're going to have chapter and verse on what these mean, or, you know, I'm really not particularly for showing these as such, because I really think, because I looked, even on the face of it, the numbers, if you look by groups, you know, these numbers are way skewed because it's, what is it, like 35% or so are black and 30% are white, or whatever those numbers are. I mean, that's fairly equal. and this is very misleading. And I know it's not your doing as such, but I'm responding to this because these are important questions, and this was very misleading from my point of view. I did the numbers, and, I looked through it and I said, hey, we have to use terms that mean something, and I know no state legislator is listening and wouldn't care anyway, but I'm going to comment that if they want to interfere and they got nothing else to do but make crap up that we've got to do, so I'm going to push back and say that these are very misleading, and I really don't. I think we have to be transparent. I want to know what those numbers are, but this is not the right way. And I know, I apologize to Mrs. Eichgarter because you've done such a great job pulling all this together. So my complaint is not to you, but that we have clarity on what all this means. That's really, when I looked at it, that just hit me.
And just to provide some of that context, basically the state is looking at discipline disparity, and there's an accountability measurement around discipline disparity, and these are the categories that the state legislature has decided to use.
Right, so Asians are part of the color enrollment?
I can't answer that question.
I'm just saying,
And Latinos?
And here's the thing. So I'm not trying to carpet you guys. I'm really not. But I'm just saying that if this hits the newspaper, I will immediately write and say, these are bogus, totally misleading, because this is really not going to be helpful to the conversation. And really, the state is off base. And boy, I wish a reporter would have been here so I could say, quote me on that. Because I am happy to be quoted on that. Do stuff that makes sense. I know that's hard to do for the people at the state level. But anyway, so, sorry, that was my, unsolicited, ranting and raving for tonight.
I just want to commend Mrs. McCulloch for being the champion for this discussion, because I really believe, and it's okay with me if the blame is the board. I'm okay with that. I mean, I think we all agree that cell phone usage has gotten out of hand, that it is disruptive and distracting to learning, that it may be linked in our district to some of the achievement issues that we're having. We certainly know that it's linked to some of the discipline issues that we're having, because we get to see those fights and expulsions that got started on Facebook or whatever, So, I think I just feel like the board needs to put its foot down and say, we need to enforce the policy that we have because it's affecting learning and behavior. So that's my final comment.
So would you support a motion to say that they're confiscated for the period of time for each level, which is originally what it was going to be, instead of the student just won't have them out?
Well, doesn't it say confiscated and given to the parent?
They give it right back to the parent that day. So the student then, it's our responsibility as a district to make sure that that student doesn't bring it back to school over that period of time that it's not supposed to be in school.
The way that I read that, if I could just jump in for a second, really rudely, is that there's going to be an escalation process. So if they get to, they can't have it for the whole semester, yet they are caught with the phone, then the offense is elevated.
Right.
And I'm assuming that'll just keep ratcheting up to the point where the phone won't come to the school because the student won't come to school.
So here's what I see. A whole heck of a lot of work for the teachers and administrators. If we took it away, we're going to have some confrontations in the beginning. We're going to have some issues with parents. But once the word gets out that this is what's going to happen, then it'll make it easier on the teachers and it'll make it easier on the school, because the word gets out and they'll have less issues with students. I agree, it's difficult in the beginning. Discipline is difficult. It's always easier to back off. It's better to start hard and back off than it is to come in and try to enforce something or get firmer or stronger. So I just see this as being a lot of work for an administrator to walk around with this list at lunch and looking to see if, the kids who have it off, okay, who's not supposed to have it today? They're not going to do that. And the teachers, they're supposed to look at that list for each class, and the students walk in the room, and if they see it on a student, they're supposed to then confiscate it, and then they've got to do all the paperwork. Why do we want them to do it over and over and over again? Why don't we, as a board, take a stand and like Ken said, let them blame us?
Well, I would just say, I think that you're talking about confiscating the phone and us keeping them locked up.
That was what the initial thought was.
I don't think that's a good idea. That's my opinion. I don't think that's a good idea.
Then
I know my phone wouldn't stop ringing over parents who are screaming, I paid $800 for that phone, you better give it back to me. So I know I would get calls like that. Yeah.
So what if we had a way when if the student is on the list for the month, instead of telling them not to bring it, they bring their phone and it gets locked up at the beginning of the day and they pick it up at the end of the day. And then they don't have it during the day.
Implementation, I guess, would be the hard part. Yeah. Mr. Connor.
Well, what I was going to say is, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think all of us are sympathetic with your point, Mrs. McCulloch, that this is an issue. I don't hear any disagreement on that. I would say, normally I'm in favor of the stringency, which I think actually we've done, and again, great credit to Mrs. Heidt-Carter and the rest of the staff for really focusing on the right things. But I think this is a case where normally I would agree that if you show it's going to work this way, but I think this one, it would be so easy for, and I hate to use this word, an insurgency around cell phones would develop. And then we'd have people organized, about this. My comment is, as much as I'm sympathetic exactly to what Mrs. McCulloch has said, let's see if this is fairly new, how the current proposal works. I mean, that's, to me, and if we find that the policy as written doesn't work, I'm assuming we can do something about that.
Nope, we wait another year, because I started this conversation at the beginning of last year, and they said, no, there's a seasonality to it. You have to do it when you do a new code next year.
Yeah.
So it's next year.
I understand. What I'm asking for is kind of patience on something we don't know, but I think the thing I would say is I think there's a much larger discussion, and to hear Mr. Vosberg say that it's a part of the evaluation, to me seems like that would almost be, in some ways, more productive a way, because the teachers are the ones that seem to me want control over, if you will, their classroom. And, as much as it's risky, it seems like the one way, meaning we lock it up and so forth, now we're building in overhead for every school. And, I'm not so sure if I were a principal that I'd want to build that in. And this is one where if it's really more up to the teachers, which is kind of what I'm hearing in a very real sense, then I'm kind of comfortable with, man, if it's really bad, let's have a discussion about cell phones in the classroom, because that really sounds to me like the root cause here, is what is that relationship, not making a rule about something that somebody really could say, and I honestly don't know. Are there students that absolutely have to have a phone for certain reasons? Would we be bumping up against a kid who needs it because they have contact and they,
All our, there's electronic Chromebooks, whatever, available to the classrooms if they need them. So.
Well, but I bet.
And the teachers will tell you it's faster if a kid whips out a phone to participate and use whatever the click and whatever. What we need to do, there are teachers that are successful, that they develop a climate in their classroom where the students are respectful and don't use the phones.
Sure.
And I don't know what the canned spiel that George gives at East, who, they kind of develop that relationship. There's a teacher at East he did use the Yonder pouches, and he said he gets to the point where the kids, and by the way, what the Yonder pouches are is the child walks in the classroom, they put their phone in this pouch, it locks,
Yeah,
and
but-
it sits on their desk. So the district is not responsible for it, but they can't use it because it's on their desk. And then as they leave, there's some sort of, it's kind of like the security tags on clothing to store or whatever. It demagnetizes it and it opens it. But he said after a point in time, they almost didn't have to use them because they had developed a relationship and that.
I can see that.
And that had
Right.
worked in the classroom. But he said he starts the year, he said he takes a whole class period at the beginning of the year to have a conversation with the students about, use and respect and how it impacts learning and all those other things. And if maybe we could get him to write a script. I mean, we can't clone him and put him everywhere. But the second piece is that there was conversation from administration that teachers, it's not just during a formal evaluation that they walk in the classroom and see how many students have it, but that there's spot checks every day throughout the school where you're dropping in to seeing how many students are using a phone or not using a phone. And if teachers know that that's going to be happening, that the time will be taken, and that's part of the support that the administration's going to give, I could find that as being a support that would help with the rest. But we have to, the administration has to commit to pushing that.
Yeah. What I would say is, and what you describe is very reasonable, is that we allow the administration to set a policy and then have to have, frankly, a certain amount of trust to say, okay, we would like to hear in 3 months or after the start of school, whatever time period, on, how this is going. I really, this is one, and I agree, the implementation is going to be the deal, but right now, this seems like at least a reasonable approach for a first step.
Ken, may I ask about cannabis? I mean, because will it be considered a controlled substance? I mean, it's like, we're all ready for it.
I had that written down right here. Marijuana use increasing discipline.
Oh, man.
Angela has a great answer to that. It's illegal.
That's right.
Well, it is, but how it's captured very specifically in here now that it's legal.
It's like you can't bring alcohol into the classroom.
Right.
Oh, actually,
Right.
They're not supposed to. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Water bottles, vodka, gin, they do just fine.
It's illegal in school.
It'll be regulated the same way alcohol.
Most certainly.
Right, but will it be specifically indicated in here as, is alcohol actually, the word alcohol in there,
Yes, we
isn't
have it
it?
separated,
So the
yes.
word cannabis should be in there as well? I don't even know what passed. Is there an age? There has to be an age limit. Does it follow alcohol?
Well,
21.
21?
I'm going
So-
to actually confer with legal on terms of how they would like that language to look, but because it is still a drug, even though cannabis it's still considered to be a drug. So therefore, because it's a drug, we may not have to change.
I think we need to have the words in there.
We'll talk to.
Hey, she's here. Hey, legal.
Hey,
Well, the fact that it's only legal for it will only be legal for 21 and older.
We all know that. It doesn't matter. They're going to say it's legal, and my mom and dad do it, so why can't I?
Right.
And you say, well, you have to do it at home.
No different than drinking in school.
But alcohol is, as long as that's listed, why not list that? Can you take care of that?
Legal doesn't have, if legal hasn't already weighed in on this, can we make sure that that's one of the assignments between now and when we come back to the board meeting? Because I think that's a really important question.
So a couple different things. There is a statute in Illinois that allows students to use medical marijuana in the event of a particular medical need. We cannot dispense that. So even with this change in law, making marijuana legal in Illinois, it's still a federal offense, but we can make it clear and specifically include the word cannabis in the student code of conduct.
Okay.
Or,
Thank
I
you.
don't know if they'll know
Thank you for bringing that
cannabis or
forward.
marijuana. I'm not sure which the students would know,
No.
but.
They would know THC oil.
In any form.
they know all the names.
Mary Jane. Okay, we'll look forward to that. All right, Angela, anything else for us?
No, the other recommended changes are there for your perusal. I don't know if you all have any comments on them at this time. Okay, all right. Well, thank you all. It's
What
always
was
a pleasure.
what was the wordage? Reparative? That was in there a lot.
Yeah, we,
Could have been reparative.
yes.
Additive.
Yeah, that was part of our social work and our community meetings where they asked for words that would be more of a positive connotation
I
instead
see,
of a
okay.
negative connotation.
So, made sense to me. It just was a lot.
It's not a loss, it's a reallocation.
There you go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for a great presentation and all your hard work.
Okay, thank you all.
We have no public speakers for tonight, so if there are no further comments or agenda recommendations by the board.
So moved.
All we have to do is add word cannabis, THC.
Hang on
Well, I
one
guess
second. The changes in
but
July.
I'll let Lori look at that tomorrow.
So
Get that
in
to
case you didn't see Laura's message, we're not going to start at 4 o'clock next Tuesday. We're going to start at the regular time. And the 16th doesn't work for a lot of administrative people are out at a conference that day. So we're going to move the committee of the whole on the 16th to the 23rd, which would normally be a board meeting night, but we don't, in July, that's a board meeting night we skip. So now we're just going to do committee of the whole on the 23rd.
July 23rd.
On the 23rd, so no meeting on the 16th, and regular start time for next Tuesday, okay? I know you'd all be happy about that. Okay. All right, motion to adjourn? And a second, all those in favor say aye. Okay, we are adjourned at 8:26.